Michael awakened the miner's hidden natural talents, and ChatJK 4 added modern knowledge of large-scale mining projects into his brain. This allowed the miner to have an understanding of how people from modern Earth leverage mechanical machines to excavate the most of ores. The miner now had a usable level of mastery over drills, conveyors, and other such mining techniques. Of course, Michael also gave him the opportunity to get his own customized skill. The man chose Mineral Sniffer, allowing him to have enhanced senses that would point him into the right direction in the mine. Michael also awakened the rest of the miners, which all thankfully had talents in mining. They expressed their thanks to Michael by promising to work even harder than before, bringing him a constant flow of quality ores and materials without fail. Congratulations, Lord Michael. In a matter of a few days, the mine shafts will be in full production. Once the mining rigs and machines have been set up by the engineers in all 3 mining shafts in the grafted cluster, Michael would have about 8,000 tons of ores and materials to use in new projects. Of course, he had to make sure that the mining machines had been perfectly set up first. So, he returned to their headquarters back in Angora City to discuss their plans with Kong, the chief engineer of the nation of Reborn. Michael hadn't seen this yellow Hobman key for so long now. Kong had been stuck in the King's region doing a lot of work in the planning of the nation of Reborn. But now that the expansion to the Queen's region was well on its way, Michael had him transfer over here to help with all of the planning and construction of future projects. Neo Orcus has been laid out well in my opinion, boss. There's a few tweaks and changes that I would like to implement, like changing the layout of the train tracks to accommodate future additions. But all in all, my juniors have done a good job. As the chief engineer of Reborn, Kong was in charge of all major construction and layout of all Reborn projects. He was the one who had made it all possible to have Reborn territories connect so seamlessly. Michael looked at Kong, who was wearing a plain shirt and pants, with only an orange safety vest over his whole attire. As the first demi-human Michael awakened, Kong had changed a lot. He was much more confident, and all of his ideas oozed competence. I'm sure you'll do a great job with Neo Orcus, Michael said to Kong. For now, I hope that you focus your talents in renovating Angora City. You've met Duke Stelmane, correct? Kong showed an exhausted smile. Yes, boss. We've met. The Duke has been pestering me all this time to have Angora City become the next paradise in the Queen's region. He wants to implement our housing, our infrastructure, and even our culture into Angora. He has practically been a resident in the baseball stadiums, while his wife was a regular at the spas. They have fully ingrained themselves in the nation of Reborn, and as far as I can tell, they have no intentions of ever leaving the place. Michael clicked his tongue, salty at how the Duke was getting to enjoy his life while he was out here doing business. Now, the Duke was having Kong do all the hard work of improving Angora City while he spent his days cheering on his favorite baseball team, the Satyr Strikers. It was quite unfair. Sorry you had to go through that, he said to Kong. It's a fine boss. It's actually quite nice to have someone appreciate our nation to such a large degree. Though, he could get a little bit overboard sometimes. But I'll try my best to make Angora City as appealing to him as the nation of Reborn so that he will eventually go home, Kong promised. The chief engineer raised his hand and casted a spell, with a magic circle appearing in front of his hands. In a matter of a few seconds, a virtual projection of Angora City showed itself to everyone in the room. Kong's eyes lit up with a blue glow as he began to create changes in the projection. His skills allowed him to perfectly translate his imagination into reality. Tall electric poles popped up in every corner, with lines connecting each and every building into the power grid. The uneven stone roads grew wider before turning into a flat concrete path that was tailor-made to have automobiles running through them at all times. Then, a large reservoir of water appeared underneath the very city itself. Large pipes then spread and branched out into the buildings, creating a clean sewage system and a plumbing system for all. This new version of Angora City was similar to the early stages of the nation of Reborn back in the days. And even though not much had changed, the city lights made the whole territory look a whole lot more otherworldly, making everyone astonished by Kong's talents. Damn, I wish I could do that, Zion said, prodding the projection. Language, Shiina warned him. Ho ho ho, what a wonderful ability. I don't think I've ever seen such a useful skill, at least. I think so. Grieve praised before getting distracted with his own amnesia. Kong bowed slightly as they praised him. This is the basic layout for Angora City. I have also made sure that there is room for new infrastructure that the citizens can build themselves. Jaku wrapped his hands around Kong's shoulders in an overly familiar way. Kong, can you add a cold beer tavern near our headquarters? I can't sleep well without it, Jaku complained. I'll see if we can do that, Jaku. The lazy Dragonborn patted the chief engineer's back as a sign of thanks. Ahem, boss. These are my plans for Angora City. Is it to your liking? Kong asked Michael. Of course, Michael knew that Kong was much more knowledgeable in this type of job, so he had no complaints whatsoever. How much resources do you need to implement this? Michael asked. Kong did some calculations in his head before returning to Michael with an answer. About 4,000 tons of ores and materials every day, boss. And that's a conservative estimate. Michael took a deep breath. Already, his budget of 8,000 tons was slashed in half with just one project. He looked towards Shiina and asked, What's the proposed budget for the Golden Road construction in the east? Shiina consulted her notes. It's 2,500 tons per day, Lord Michael. All in all, those two projects would cost about 6,500 tons of materials every day, which was just about under their budget. I'm also planning on creating more gas stations along the Golden Road. Do you think that's possible? Kong created another projection in the air, and this time, it was a top-down view of the southern tip of the Queen's region. And branching from Neo-Orcus was the highlighted Golden Road, which branched out westwards toward the Grafted Cluster. Just then, truck stops appeared along even intervals along the Golden Road, showing the finished product of Michael's vision. Is possible, boss, but I estimate that it will take around 1,500 tons of material to construct it. Mike sighed. In just one day, he lost and gained a lot of resources. And it seems Michael's need for resources didn't end there. One of the dogfolk Rebonians in charge of the factories back in the nation of Reborn approached Michael with a problem. Boss, we are running low on metal to create more automobiles, he said. Angora City has now fully taken to using gas-powered cars, prompting a lot of them to buy them en masse. And even though we had just established the Golden Road in the Grafted Cluster, they seem to have the biggest demand for automobiles already. Michael was, as they say, suffering from success. The automobiles have gotten so popular as of late that their factories were having trouble keeping up with the demand. They could barely even supply the King's region with automobiles. And now the Queen's region was also starting to become hungry for more. He tried to ask for more material from the Dwarven Kingdom, but they were getting low on supplies too. They had recently started expanding their territory and increasing the quality of their infrastructure, so everything they mined was going straight to their own projects. Michael was having quite a problem. There's an easy solution, Yuna interjected. You're planning on having other companies establish their stores in the truck stops, right? Why not have them procure their own materials to help construct the infrastructure? Michael was quite surprised that such a convenient answer was there all this time. Is that possible? He asked her. Yuna nodded. It happened a lot of the time. Most real estate companies like the Goldstone Corporation use this tactic to create more infrastructure without having a lot of natural resources at hand. This solved Michael's current problem and could possibly even help him in the end. Can I ask for more supplies than what is required? You can if it's part of the contract. Instead of them paying you with gold coins, you can have them pay you by whatever resource you'd like, she replied matter-of-factly. Shiina knew what Michael was thinking and immediately consulted her notes and began to think deep and hard. There are about 11 restaurant companies, 8 smithing groups, 5 taverns, and 15 merchant groups in Angora City that have already expressed their intentions to cooperate with us, Shiina reported. If we were to ask them for 200 tons of ores and materials for the construction of the gas stations, then we can net a total of almost 7,800 tons of natural resources in total. Michael couldn't help but flash a smile as he heard that. This would probably be enough to pay for the entirety of the truck stops in the western region of the Golden Road, with some leftover to help with the automobile production. Finally, Michael had solved his resource problems. But of course, he actually had to make those ideas come true. China, I want you to visit those companies here in Angora City and tell them about our proposed plan. But for now, Kong, I want you to complete the mining projects in the grafted cluster so that we can start mining for resources. As you wish, boss, Kong replied. However, I am not talented enough to create complicated oil machinery. I suggest one of my juniors, who has shown great talent in tinkering with those kinds of stuff. Kong invited a female lamia into the room. Michael recognized her to be one of the lamias who had a talent in engineering, which was quite rare for their species. This is Priya, boss. She was able to take apart and reconstruct the automobile engine without any help. I'm sure that she will be able to create the mining machines you wanted. Priya wore a hard hat and had grease and dirt marks all over her clothes and her scales. This was evidence that she didn't mind getting her hands dirty to do the job. And as he observed her, his superior golden nose suddenly itched. He peered through her using his supreme skill and was elated to find out that she was eligible for a second talent awakening. Talent: S-Class Oil Machinery Expert. Potential Evolution Paths. Magical Lamia Excavator. This species of lamia uses their innate magic to displace large amounts of the earth to find precious ores and materials. Ore Farmer Lamia. This species of lamia are able to plant ores and materials underground in order to grow more natural resources. One of those evolutionary paths was much more interesting to Michael. However, he didn't want to force Priya into choosing what she didn't like. I choose the farmer lamia, boss. Farming natural resources and harvesting them sounds fun, boss. Michael inwardly celebrated. Not only did he have a Rebornian who had the talent to create the complicated machinery required for mass-scale mining, but she also had a unique power that could help with the scarcity of natural resources as well. It was a double win. He immediately awakened her second talent, imbuing her with a blinding light before it subsided a few seconds later. Now, Priya's scales had turned brown with an almost rocky texture that would help her blend perfectly in the mountains. And thanks to ChatJK4, Priya was given all the mechanical knowledge to create those oil-powered drilling machines, excavators, and conveyor belts to help with the mining in the grafted cluster. When can you start? Priya bowed to Michael. Thank you, boss. We can start as soon as I arrive in the grafted cluster. I can mine all the materials I need there to create the drilling machinery. Michael felt a burden lift off his shoulders. He immediately used his own shadows to teleport Priya and about 10 other Rebornian engineers to the mountain ranges in the grafted cluster. There, they met with the miners who were already briefed about their arrival. Michael promised to supply them with all the food and fuel they would need to start the mining projects as fast as possible. While Priya and the engineers were setting up the machines in the 3 mining shafts, Michael visited the first truck stop on the Golden Road. It was finally finished. The gas station was already being used, with a couple of Reborn trucks and automobiles refueling for their trip. There were also quite a few Reborn taxis carrying civilian passengers entering the gas station to refuel. And these people were the first few guests who laid eyes on Reborn's first truck stop. "What is this?" one of the passengers asked. "This is the Reborn truck stop," answered the Rebornian driver. "This is where we can refuel our cars and also our stomachs. Do you see that building over there?" The passenger looked over past the gas station. There was a lone building erected in an empty space which had the name Reborn Kitchen etched near the roof. Its chimneys spewed out white smoke, which wafted over the passengers and brought over the delectable smell of fresh meat soup and vegetable stir-fry. This tempted them to enter the building while their taxi was busy refueling. Once they entered, they saw a few people already eating warm soup at the tables while the chefs were busy cooking over on the opposite side of the room. "Welcome. Eat to your heart's desires." The chef welcomed the new visitor. It didn't take long before the rumors of the Reborn truck stop spread to Angora City. It became the premier destination for all people traveling down the Golden Road. Those weary travelers tired of eating nothing but rock-hard bread and river water for weeks on end would suddenly find an oasis in between Angora City and the grafted cluster. The Reborn kitchen was most especially crowded because of this, with many people craving for hot and fresh homemade meals after their long travels. There was also the Reborn Inn, where they could sleep at for a very fair price. They no longer had to camp out in the wilderness where danger was plenty. Michael was actually quite surprised that there were already a lot of people visiting the truck stop, even though it had just finished construction. The other establishments like the convenience stores and other specialty shops weren't yet finished construction. He attached his shadows to the Reborn restaurant and listened in as an envoy of travelers talked amongst themselves. "Ah, it's great to have such a safe haven in this place," one adventurer said as he drank beer. "True that, brother. The Reborn Company truly is an innovator in this regard. No wonder they ranked number 450, said another adventurer. Meanwhile, the merchant they were escorting chimed in. "I even think that estimation is quite low. Do you know how much an automobile cost? It's tens of thousands of gold coins. And everyone's buying it now. In my opinion, they're probably even richer than the top 400. Speaking of which, I think I want to buy an automobile soon. It's too convenient, especially since it's faster than a carriage and can outrun those pesky ferries." "I agree. I just hope they build a golden road on the eastern side soon, so that we won't have to deal with those problems again." The shadow underneath their table perked up as Michael heard that word. Ferry. Unfortunately, the group of envoys strayed away from that topic soon after. They talked about a lot of mundane stuff, which Michael wasn't interested in. "Fairies, huh? Chat JK 4. Do you have any more information about them?" "Fairies. Difficulty. Element. Poison earth. These demi-humans live in an entirely different dimension, which is intrinsically linked to nature and the earth itself. They are often found where the earth element is most abundant. The powder on their wings is said to give people and objects the ability to fly. However, they're also known for being pranksters, often playing tricks on humans and demi-humans alike." Michael was quite intrigued to see these fairies for himself, especially since one of the descriptors ChatJK forgave them was that they lived in places with a lot of earth mana. Guess what was also present in places with a lot of earth mana? Ores and minerals. From what I heard, these fairies seem to be located in the eastern region of Angora City. It's exactly where I'll branch out the Golden Road next. This was good information to know before they started construction. After all, it seemed that these fairies weren't too welcoming of humans and often played pranks on them. To find more about this strange phenomenon, he tasked the Shadow Orc chieftains, Naruto and Sasuke, to do a little reconnaissance mission to find out the truth about what was happening east of Angora City. It only took about a day before Naruto and Sasuke came back to Michael and reported to him about their findings. "BU-2. Boss, we found out that recently there have been a lot of reports about strange happenings in the roads east of Angora," Naruto reported. "Ra-ta-ta. There have been cases of people suddenly losing their things while they camp out in the wilderness. Sometimes they magically come back and sometimes they don't. Some even find their coin pouches floating up and towards the sky, never to be seen again. Their reports sounded like something a troublemaker would do. A prankster, one could even call them. Do you think it's caused by these fairies?" he asked them. "It is rumored so, boss. But none of them have ever been proven. The fairies never show up at the same place, making it hard to verify the truth." Michael tapped his feet as he thought about it deeply. Something didn't make sense. Why haven't I heard about them before? It sounded like something that the people of Angora City would have experienced before. After a long time in Angora City, never once did Michael hear anybody mention anything about the fairies in the east. This was weird because the two territories were directly connected by merchants and travelers alike. That's the thing, boss. These fairies used to just be a fleeting rumor before. They would appear maybe about once a year to make some harmless pranks, but recently, they started to get active about once every day, Sasuke reported. When did this change happen? About the same time that we built the Golden Road in the Grafted Cluster, Naruto replied. That is too much of coincidence. Something must have affected the fairies for them to act up after all this time. There's another thing, boss. Do you remember the Bastard Bandits? Michael nodded. They were the group of thieves that were positioned around the forests above Angora City. Sleazy was one of them, and according to Barkus, it seemed that the Bastard Bandits were under Flare Corp's payroll as well. Our shadow clones have been closely observing their every movement and their conversations. One thing we found out lately was that they seem to be allied with another faction in the forest. At first, we thought that their ally was only Flare Corp, but as it turned out, it's a completely different group. They have a nickname for this group, sir. They call them Pixies. Michael was very familiar with that term. He heard the name Pixies associated with fairies back in his previous world. Was that a coincidence? Michael didn't think so. After all, east of Angora City was located in a forest inhabited by the Bastard Bandits. That was also where the reports of the fairies were being found. Could the Bastard Bandits and the fairies be working together? Michael muttered to himself, and it seems that the Orc chieftains thought so as well. Should we send out an elite Orc task force to kidnap one of the bandits and force them to tell us the truth? Naruto asked. Michael shook his head. There's no need to go through all that trouble, he said to them. We have our own group of bandits back home. Meanwhile, back in the nation of Reborn, citizens and visitors alike were living an extremely well-off life. Not only that, but the nation of Reborn was one of the safest places in the entire world. There were centaurs patrolling every street and corner, making sure that everybody was safe. Each citizen also had a shadow or clone attached to their feet that could summon support in a matter of a few seconds. This was well known among the people, so it would be common sense for people not to commit any crimes. But surprisingly, people were committing crimes. Not for money, no. They just wanted to get caught and sent into the Reborn prison, where they would be treated much better than even their own homes. The prison in the nation of Reborn was completely different from any other prison in the entire world. For starters, prisoners were given warm food 3 times a day and a comfortable bed to sleep on at night. It would have been one thing if the food was just bread and some slop. But no, they were given scrumptious meals that were even better than some restaurants ranked in the Golden 500. And since the nation of Reborn was located in the heart of the parched lands, prison cells were also equipped with state-of-the-art air conditioning systems that turned the uncomfortable summer season into a breeze. That alone made the prison experience into more of a vacation than anything else. But that wasn't all. If they behaved well enough in the prison and didn't break any rules, then they were entitled to some benefits in the nation, such as board game nights, baseball games, and even a trip to the artificial hot springs. Anyone could see that even prisoners were treated better than other people in the entirety of the royal continent. Some could even say that they were being treated even better than kings. Of course, the life of the prisoners wasn't all that glamorous. They were forced to work for the nation of Reborn without pay. For example, they had to do some manual labor in one of the mines near the desert, or they had to sweep the streets for the constant sand that was brought in by the breeze. But in exchange for the comfortable life of a prisoner, most people would willingly do those menial chores for free. In fact, that was what some people were actually doing. They didn't have any money to stay in the sought-after treehouse inns of the Satur district or the floating river houses of the Lamia district. They especially didn't have enough money to stay in the 5-star hotels located at the center of the city. So they chose the next best thing. They steal a very menial item from the Reborn stores and turn themselves in to be admitted at the Reborn prisons. "You're in here again?" asked one of the Rebornian guards to the newcomer. "Yep. I threw my biodegradable trash in the non-biodegradable section. I'm a criminal, haha." The other prisoners in the courtyard laughed and welcomed this newcomer into the prison. There was no sense of anguish or discomfort here, as if this wasn't even a prison at all. It was more like a small village inside of a much bigger city. For people like Sleazy and the rest of the Bastard Bandits that were caught by Michael, this was a very unusual sight. When they were caught trying to rob a Reborn automobile, they thought they were completely done for. Heck, Sleazy thought he died when he was knocked out. But surprisingly, they were spared by Michael and were transferred over to this place. At first, Sleazy and the rest of the bandits banded together closely. They knew they were in prison, they just didn't know where. And since they were newcomers, they knew that it was very likely that they would get picked on by the older prisoners. However, on their very first day, the prisoners approached them with wide smiles and showed them the ropes in this entire prison. The prisoners made them feel welcomed. And here Sleazy thought they would have to fight their way to survive in this prison, But as it turned out, there wasn't even any fighting going on. Everyone was going along well with each other. Not only that, but the prisoners and the guard were also friendly with each other. As bandits, this wasn't the first time they were incarcerated. And in every prison they'd been to, most guards were abusive of their captives. After all, the prisoners would try to break out of the walls any chance they could get. It was a dog-eat-dog world in prisons. But not here. This place was the complete opposite. What the hell is this place? Sleazy asked them. This is the Reborn prison. Here, I'll show you around. The senior prisoners guided Sleazy and the bandits over to their dorm cells, where they were each given a room of their own, with cool air being blasted inside for a comfortable sleep. Winter, are we in the mountains? And how is that light not flickering? What is it made out of if not oil lamps? The bandits were completely flabbergasted by Reborn's new technologies. But thanks to the helpful senior prisoners who guided them through everything inside, Sleazy and the bandits found themselves getting familiar with everything as the day passed. Over the next several days, Sleazy and the bandits would be invited by the senior prisoners for all the activities inside the prison. They played baseball, they had art classes, and they even had a chance to tour the entirety of the nation of Reborn. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that a whole new world opened up to these bandits. They used to live in dark caves with nothing but oil lamps and moldy bread to accompany them in. Yet, here in this place they called the paradise in the desert, they were given everything they would ever want even though they were only lowly prisoners. The food in the prison cafeteria was the most delicious and most filling meal that they had ever tasted in their life. They didn't even think water could taste this good. Sleazy would always remember that first bite of pizza when it was Pizza Mondays in the prison. He finally understood why people were voluntarily admitting themselves into this prison even though they weren't real criminals like them. However, Sleazy would always remind himself that he was different. Unlike most of the prisoners here, he had taken multiple lives when he was a bandit. This put a damper on his mood, making him less active during the baseball sessions and the board game nights with the rest of the prisoners. And somehow, one of the seniors noticed it. "I know how you feel," the senior prisoner said to Sleazy. "Do you know how I got here? I tried to kill a Rebornian because I saw the expensive silk clothes he wore. I knew about the nation of Reborn, but I didn't care. I killed before so I could kill again. But thankfully, I was thwarted by the Rebornians. They put me into this prison and made me realize that the silk clothes that I thought were so valuable were given free in this nation. Free. That was how good life is here in the paradise in the desert. Now, I'm trying to repent my sins. All of it. I don't care how many years it takes. I will do my time, and hopefully one day I could walk out of this prison as a free man. And not just any free man, a Rebornian." Sleazy looked at the senior closely and finally noticed the tattoo on the side of his neck. He recognized him. He was a famous bandit in the Queen's region, one that rivaled even that of the leader of the Bastard Bandits. People thought this legendary figure died or retired, but as it turned out, he was here in the nation of Reborn this whole time. "It's not too late for you, my friend," said the senior as he left Sleazy alone. Realizing this, a warm sensation flooded his chest. If even the dastardliest of criminals could change, then maybe he could as well. Michael descended into his shadows and teleported directly back to the nation of Reborn in a split second. He headed straight for the Reborn prison, located right next to the Centaur Police Department in the northwest side of the nation. He entered the building and saw the Rebornian police, mostly made up of centaurs and demi-humans, working in their desks and typing up paperwork. They all saluted at Michael once he entered the doors, greeting him with a smile on their faces. "Morning, boss. Good to see you, Boss Michael." Even one of the prisoners being handcuffed greeted Michael with a great big old smile on his face. "Whoa, nice to finally meet you, Sir Michael." This confused Michael. "Huh, what's up with him?" "He's a voluntary prisoner, boss. It's an epidemic, but there's nothing we can do. They just love going inside our prisons," one of the Centaur guards said. They all looked back at the prisoner, who just shrugged his shoulders. "What can I say? I'm living much better here compared to my old town." "This is normal?" The guard began to tell Michael about how normal civilians purposefully incarcerated themselves. They were usually people who couldn't afford the high prices of the nation of Reborn, but wanted to stay here for a long time. Michael was shocked, to be honest. It wasn't like he didn't understand their motives. After all, he did design the Reborn prison to be a comfortable and relaxing way for criminals to repent for their sins. But he didn't expect that people would commit petty crimes just to get inside the prison. I'll have to design some kind of affordable housing in the future. If only our resource budget is high enough, I could build all the housing for everyone. It was a shame that ores and minerals were an extremely limited resource. Michael decided to put off the problem for now and focus on other things. Is the police chief inside? He asked the centaur. Yep. He just finished his patrol, boss. You'll find him at his office. Michael followed the precinct map and found a large corner office on the second floor of the prison. He knocked on the door and went inside. There, he saw a normal office with desks and shelves filled with paperwork. However, the wall behind the office was not made out of wood or concrete, but glass instead. These large glass panes overlooked the prison courtyard, where they could see the entirety of the prison dorms as well as the large open area where prisoners were playing outdoor activities. Right now, most of them were playing a miniature version of baseball, using their hands as the hitting bats. Boss Michael, welcome to the prison. The chief police, Centaur, shook hands with Michael. Is there anything I can do for you? Shall I send in more police, centaurs, and Neo-Orcus? Michael shook his head. Not this time. I just wanted to have a little chat with one of your prisoners. His name is Sleazy. The centaur raised his head in understanding. Ah, yes. The one that you delivered right to our doorstep. You can find him right over there, sitting in the corner by himself. He pointed at the corner of the glass, where there was a lone man sitting by himself and hugging his knees. Thanks, Michael said before using his shadows to get through the small gaps in the window panes and teleport him inside the prison courtyard. Michael appeared in the middle of the prison courtyard. The prisoners were busy doing some kind of group activities, which most of them were participating in. A violet slime suddenly popped up out of his shadow and landed on top of his head. Don't worry, master. I'll be here to protect you from that sleazy meanie. Michael appreciated Fudge's help. It was like seeing a dog bark at a stranger. Although it was unneeded, it was a bit nice to see them so protective. They both approached Sleazy, who immediately whipped his head up upon noticing his presence. You're Michael, the owner of Reborn, Sleazy muttered, recognizing Michael from all the posters of his face plastered all over the nation. That was the first thing he saw when he was allowed to tour outside the prison. I am, and you're Sleazy from the Bastard Bandits, Michael replied. Just then, Fudge jumped out of Michael's head and landed in front of Sleazy. Listen, you better tell us what you know about the Bastard Bandits. Okay, I'll tell you everything you need to know. Fudge wasn't even finished threatening Sleazy, but the man had already folded like a lawn chair. It didn't even take a few threatening allusions to make him talk. Even Michael was surprised. He was expecting a lot of hostility from Sleazy, especially since he was the one who put him here in the first place. And he certainly wasn't expecting the man to be ready to tell the truth about his own group so fast. According to Barkus, Sleazy had a reputation for being hard-headed about the Bastard Bandits. In all the prisons that had taken him in, no one was able to make him squeal about the true location of their hideout. But after just a second of talking to him, Sleazy was already ready to tell the whole truth. What gives? I'll tell you everything you need to know to dismantle the Bastard Bandits, Sleazy said to Michael. This was even more surprising. He just wanted some information about the fairies, but he ended up getting the fuse to a bomb instead. Why would you do that? Michael asked, genuinely curious. Sleazy then pointed to the courtyard behind Michael. There, some of the Bastard Bandits were playing baseball with the other prisoners, having the time of their lives. I never knew that there was such a paradise like this, Sleazy muttered. When I heard about the Reborn Company, I thought you were just one of those groups that only cares about money and profits. With how fast you achieved that 450th spot, I thought that was the only way you could have achieved it. But what I see here in the prison, what I'm given here as a prisoner, I see now that my worldview has been skewed this whole time. People here don't commit crimes. They don't steal. They don't rob. They don't have to because this place gives them everything they would ever want in their lives. The things that people have here for free are things that we would have killed to get. This place made me realize that there was a better place for even the most despicable of criminals. That there was a place where we could live like normal humans despite who or what we were. If I'd been born here, perhaps I wouldn't have done what I did. Sleazy then looked up at Michael, his face full of desperation. So please, destroy the bastard bandits. My only wish is that you spare them too and let them come here to this prison. I know that they will live better lives here than in that cave. I can't be the only one that lives in such luxuries. Michael looked at Sleazy and saw genuinity in his face. The man that had planned to kill a Rebornian driver to steal a truck was now showing complete remorse over his own actions. His little monologue about wanting the other bandits to live a better life here in Reborn could make even grown man cry. Sniff, sniff, I guess you're not such a bad guy after all, Fudge said with violet tears streaming down his amorphous body. It's safe to say that you have good intentions in having us dismantle the bastard bandits, Michael muttered. If so, then you should start to tell us everything you know. Sleazy nodded and began to spill the beans about the bastard bandits' modus of operandi. First of all, they mainly stayed in the forest, where they had absolute mastery over the environment. They used the caves, the trees, and the ground to surprise the people traveling through their territory. They paraded their business as a security agency, charging people with a safety fee to travel in the forest. But of course, this was nothing more than a scam. It was just a fee not to get harassed by them. If a traveler refused to pay, then the bastard bandits would immediately send out people to scare them, either through force or through tricks. Once people were afraid of their lives, or if the bandits stole enough cargo, then they could leave the forest unharmed for the rest of the trip. You say they use tricks, what kind? Michael asked. Sleazy leaned in. I don't know if you believe this, but did you know that fairies are real? Michael's eyes widened. It looked like his guess was right. The fairies were involved with the bastard bandits. As for the degree and reason for their cooperation, he had yet to know. The reason that we have remained as the dominant force in the forest was because we had help from a supernatural force, the fairies. There were countless companies and organizations that had enough of our security fee and tried to attack us in our base, but we would always prevail against them even though we had nothing but scraps for our equipment. They would storm the forest in search of our base, sharp weapons and tough shields in hand ready for a fight, but they would always end up getting lost in the maze of the forest. They would find themselves losing maps, getting separated, and even attacked by the ground itself in the dead of night. This was the work of the fairies, not the bastard bandits, as others would believe. It seemed that the connection with the fairies and the bastard bandits were a lot closer than Michael thought, if they were the one helping the bandits to keep control of the forest. Why are they helping the bandits? Do they have an alliance with them? Sleazy shook his head. No such thing. The bastard bandits and the fairies are not friends of any kind. In fact, I have only seen glimpses of their small, glowing figures a couple of times before, and I'm sure that low-level bandits don't even know of their existence. Fairies and the bastards are just unlikely acquaintances with a symbiotic relationship with each other. The bastard bandits use the fairies for protection, and the fairies use the bastard bandits for sustenance, for food. Fudge immediately cringed. EW, they're eating bandits? No. Fairies do not eat food like us humans. They eat something completely different, human emotions. Specifically, they want fear. Oh, they love it when humans scream in terror. And finally, things were starting to make sense for Michael. So that's the reason why, he said in contemplation. They want the bandits to continue scaring travelers. The reason why the fairies were sticking around and helping the bastard bandits was because they feed on all the fear and terror that the bandits give to the foreigners entering the forest. It was a completely symbiotic relationship. If the bastard bandits were defeated and ejected from the forest, then the fairies would no longer have a reliable source of human emotion. Well, to be more accurate, the fairies were using bandits, and vice versa. But I heard that the fairies have been too active lately. Do you have any idea why? Sleazy had no answer because he had been transferred here to the prison long before this strange event happened. I don't know for sure, but I do know that the fairies get really pissed off if they don't have anything to eat. We had a really slow month where we didn't have a scared human to offer them, and they turned all our beds into rocks and all our water into sand. If that was true, then maybe Michael's Golden Road may have had an effect on the fairies' consumption of human emotion. After all, there were less and less people traveling to the east thanks to the easy taxi services that Reborn offered in every town or settlement connected to the Golden Road. Less travelers meant less people scared. Maybe the big change in the Bastard Bandits had something to do with that, Sleazy muttered to himself. What do you mean? Asked Michael. Before we try to rob your automobile, the Bastard Bandits had just recently undergone a major change. We were approached by people from Flare Corp who wanted for us to become allies. Normally, we would have just scoffed at their attempt, but we were given an offer we just couldn't refuse. They offered us twice the gold coins we were making each year off of the security fees, as well as lifetime supplies of Flare Corp products, including their weapons and armors. The only thing we had to do was to pledge allegiance to Flare Corp and become subordinates to their king. Not a lot of bandits liked that idea, so the agreement with Flare Corp wasn't accepted right away. But maybe that changed. With bandits becoming subordinates to Flare Corp, no doubt their days of threatening travelers for a measly amount of gold coins was over. This was what probably pissed off the fairies the most. So I guess that expanding east of Angora City won't be as easy as I thought. I'd have to deal with the fairies, the Bastard Bandits, and Flare Corp all together. Michael wasn't too worried about Flare Corp and the bandits. He knew what he was dealing with if he fought with them. However, he didn't know anything about fairies and their strengths as of yet. It would be a complete disadvantage for him if he picked a fight with them knowing nothing about them. Sleazy looked up at Michael and gave him a word of warning. I'd be careful with angering the fairies too much, he said with a grave voice. There's a reason why even our bandit leader treats the fairies with a lot of respect and fear. The last time he didn't, he lost an arm. The fairies are being led by an ancient and very powerful figure as wise as even the oldest trees in the world. They say that this demi-human is equivalent in strength and in power with even that of the Ocean King and the Demon Queen. They call her the Pixie Queen. A Pixie Queen? Michael thought to himself. I'd have to accompany the construction workers when they create the Golden Road in the east if she's around. I suggest that you deal with the Bastard Bandits first. These people are the most stubborn of heads. Even if you tell them all the benefits they would get if they surrender to you, they won't believe it. It's in our nature not to, Sleazy said. So what do you suggest? Michael asked. Do what you did to me. Beat some sense into them, Sleazy answered directly. Once they find themselves in this prison, they'll finally understand. Now, Michael wasn't fond of the idea of kidnapping these bandits directly from their hideout. After all, they hadn't done any wrong against him or the nation of Reborn. Sleazy seemed to have noticed this and assured Michael, don't worry. If the Reborn Company comes to the East Forest and they don't pay the fees, then they will easily present themselves to you for easy pickings. Some might call that entrapment, but Michael was going to expand eastward anyway, and he especially wouldn't want to pay their fees in the first place, so this all worked out in the end. Why don't you help me? Michael asked Sleazy. This seemed to have surprised the reformed bandit. Me? But I'm a criminal, you know. So, Michael asked, as if he didn't understand the possible consequences of releasing a criminal into the wild. Aren't you afraid that I'll escape? Michael chuckled at Sleazy's response. Someone with bad intentions would have immediately said yes. And besides, I have a good eye for these things. You won't escape. You don't want to. Sleazy didn't expect to hear such an innocent way of thinking from the owner of the massively growing Reborn company. Michael may look like a child, but he knew that a person that was able to build a company like this from the ground up was definitely not naive. There was something else that made Michael so carefree about things like these. And as a former bandit, Sleazy thought he wouldn't see this type of feeling from Michael. There was pride in the golden-haired boy's eyes. The reason why there was a hierarchy in the Bastard Bandits, despite them all being lawless criminals, was because of something called pride and honor. The subordinates of the bandit leader don't betray and steal from their leader because they knew they would lose against him. Fair and simple. And now, Sleazy felt the same kind of confidence in Michael's eyes. It gave him the sense of feeling that even if he did try to escape, he wouldn't be able to run for long. Even though he didn't know Michael's true power, this gave him a glimpse of it. Heck, they tamed Deathclaw, the senior prisoner that had been helping him from day one. The man was so different from his reputation that Sleazy almost didn't recognize him before. If they could tame him, then he definitely didn't stand a chance to escape, even if he wanted to. "Offer my help to you," Sleazy said to Michael. "I'll make sure that my friends see the light of Reborn just the same way as I have." Hey, I knew you were a good person," Fudge said as he jumped on top of Sleazy's head. "You want to become my junior?" Sleazy awkwardly laughed. "I'm afraid I'm not worthy, sir." "Then work hard, eh? Maybe someday you could become a good ninja like me as well." Just as they were having their conversation, Michael felt someone's presence. He looked around and saw one of the prisoners with a bright orange jumpsuit approaching them from the side. "Ahem, Senior Slime. I know that you are more than capable of defeating the bastard bandits all on your own, but I hereby offer my services to you if you need it." The prisoner was a very tall and muscular guy, with tattoos all over his face and his body. The man was the embodiment of intimidating. Yet this man bowed to Fudge in a straight 90-degree angle. But it wasn't just his appearance that Michael noticed. It was also his strength. The man's mana core was in the 7th realm. This meant that he was probably one of the strongest people here. No doubt about it. Michael would have to go all out if the two of them were to go head-to-head. "Oh, it's you?" Fudge disappointingly said. "Didn't I tell you to behave?" The large, burly prisoner lowered his head. "I did, Senior Slime. However, I think that my unique circumstances will allow me to help you on your mission with the bastard bandits. I know one of them intimately, Senior." Fudge tilted his head left and right, as if trying to weigh the pros and cons of. "Yeah, sure. Why not? Just make sure not to get in my way, all right?" The man bowed his head, thankful. After that, Fudge went on to talk to Sleazy as if nothing even happened. But of course, Michael was caught stunned that this happened without his knowledge. "Fudge, who is this?" The violet slime looked back at the prisoner with a glare. "Hey, introduce yourself. How rude of you. Don't you know our master?" "My apologies." The burly man faced Michael. "I am Jose Cruz, formerly known as Deathclaw. I was a rogue bandit living in the southern tip of the Queen's region by myself, terrorizing travelers and merchants without limit. That was until I encountered Senior Slime. He taught me a lesson, one that I wouldn't forget. And now, I come here in the Reborn prison to repent my sins and hope that someday I could become a proud Rebornian that Senior Slime could be proud of." Keep dreaming, kid. You still need 100 years of servitude before I'll allow you to become a Rebornian," Fudge said harshly. "I deserve no less," Deathclaw replied. From the way they interacted, it seemed like Fudge really tamed a 7-star bandit by himself. Michael didn't even know how that happened, or that it was even possible given the gap in strength. "You defeated him all by yourself?" Michael asked Fudge. "Of course, master. I am your strongest warrior after all, much stronger than those scaled meanies." As usual, Michael knew Fudge was lying. "Deathclaw, was it? Tell me the truth." The prisoner looked at Michael, then at Fudge, who was doing all sorts of faces to signal him not to tell Michael anything. "I'm sorry, Senior Slime. You said it yourself that he is your master. Therefore, he is also my master by connection. I am compelled to tell him the truth. I was bested by Senior Slime in a drinking game. I was able to do 20 barrels of beer before I passed out." Michael couldn't close his jaws. That's it. That's how Fudge tamed the so-called Deathclaw. He didn't know if he should be proud of the little guy or if he should be embarrassed. "Whatever, if you help us with the bastard bandits, then it would be appreciated," Michael said to Deathclaw. "Anything for Reborn," the burly man replied. Meanwhile, in the deep recesses of the forest east of Angora City, there was a cave hidden in plain sight, covered by moss and overgrown weeds that most people would just assume as an empty plot of land. However, what they didn't know was that this was the very hideout of the infamous bastard bandits that took the forest as their own territory. The people living inside this cave wore fancy but mismatched armors, jewels, and all sorts of expensive paraphernalia. But one must not confuse them as the wealthy type, for they only procure these items from stealing and robbing merchants who failed to pay the fee when entering the forest. Most people would find it surprising to see a bustling community in this cave. The bastard bandits had carved for themselves a connection of tunnels and burrows to make a small village, with designated districts and regions specifically meant for one purpose or another. And although the famous adage said that there was no honor among thieves, there was one thing that these criminals followed, and that was strength. The reason why the Bastard Bandits organized themselves into a pseudo-company was because of one man only, their bandit leader known as One Hand Wayno. Wayno, as his nickname implied, only had his left hand as his usable arm, with the other one turned into nothing but a stump after a meeting gone wrong with the mythical Pixie Queen. There were rumors about how this happened, with others guessing that Wayno fought one-on-one against her, or that she cursed his arm when he was asleep. But the truth was that no one knew except for Wayno, and he wasn't planning on telling it to anyone anytime soon. The bandit leader stayed at the very deepest part of the tunnel system, protected by layers and layers of earth above him. Usually, Wayno stayed alone in his hideout, but this time he was accompanied by someone who looked completely out of place inside the bandit cave. While Wayno sat at his desk and tapped his feet on the ground anxiously, this guest strolled around the room as if he was touring a museum. The bandit seemed more uncomfortable in his own home compared to this guest. The bright orange armor this guest wore was extremely telling of his background. His allegiance was stamped right on his chest plate, with the symbol of a flame burning the entire world. He was a Flare Corp representative. Have your bandits made a decision yet? Have you found the true light in Flare Corp? The rep asked Wayno. The bandit leader looked up. We haven't made a decision, he answered. Almost half of our men reject the premise of being subordinated to a large company like Flare Corp. They treat it as a selling out. The Flare Corp rep shook his head in disappointment. You do know that she's coming here soon, right? The venerable beauty, the third in command, the silent killer Blazel Oscorp. She will want an answer by the time she arrives. And she definitely will be expecting a resounding yes from all of you. If not, then you will force our hand and cull those who say no. There is a clear, threatening tone in the rep's voice, something that Wayno clearly didn't appreciate. Watch it, Wayno warned him. You'll not lay a hand on the bastards while I'm here. Wayno's 6-star power came rushing out of his body, creating a shockwave that tried to push the Flare Corp rep off balance. Unfortunately, it didn't do much in terms of threatening the Flare Corp rep. The man steadied his feet and just coughed. Don't throw your anger out on me, the rep said, raising his hand innocently. I'm just a messenger. I don't like your message, Wayno replied, eyeing him. Ahem. Flare Corp would like to remind you that there is a reason why the Bastard Bandits have been forced to ally yourselves with us. Your power has been dwindling. Don't deny it. Ever since the legendary Deathclaw disappeared from your ranks, the Bastard Bandits have been steadily declining ever since. And with the Golden Road race that's been happening up north, it will only be a matter of time until the others set their sights onto you. We won't be the first to threaten you. Wayno gritted his teeth. Even though he didn't want to admit it, the Flare Corp rep was telling the truth. They were getting weak. Flare Corp is being nice to you now. They could have just taken your territory by force, but instead, they offered to cooperate with you on a long-term basis. And don't say that Flare Corp is overestimating themselves. You know that you won't stand a chance against us, not since Deathclaw disappeared on you guys. The bandit leader spat on the ground. Are you done talking? Not yet. Blazel wants you to do her a favor. She wants you to arrange a meeting with the Pixie Queen. Flare Corp will consider this as a big merit for you, with the possibility of you even becoming a full-fledged employee of Flare Corp. This time, Wayno couldn't hold it in and stood up in defiance, smacking his hand on the desk. Are you kidding me? The Pixie Queen. Why not have her ask for a meeting with the Ocean King or the Demon Queen? At least that would be easier. The Flare Corp rep pointed at his missing right arm. Wasn't she the one who did this to you? Wayno grabbed his phantom limb. Yes, but that was only once. She has never shown her face on the surface ever again, and not one of us have ever personally met with a fairy before, much less their queen. In response, the Flare Corp rep just shrugged his shoulders. We don't care how you do it, but just know that we will appreciate it if you do. And just like that, the rep walked out of Wayno's room and returned to the surface, leaving the bandit leader to rack his brains on all the impossible tasks given to him. If only Senior hadn't left, we wouldn't get treated like this, Wayno muttered to himself, remembering the former bandit leader Deathclaw. A couple of seconds later, A few bandits entered the room. Wayno, what did those corpo bastards want? Wayno told his trusted subordinates everything about his conversation with the Flare Corp rep, and they too expressed their grievances over such a nigh impossible task. What should we do? Only one thing, Wayno replied. We'll hinder the progress of the Reborn company. It's no secret that they had been planning on expanding the Golden Road eastward, directly crossing the forest that they controlled. By doing this, they would accomplish two tasks. One, they would protect their livelihood as bandits. Once the Golden Road was finished, they would find it hard to ask for protection fees from the people since they have a safe road to travel on. Therefore, they would lose business. And second, they would finally be able to feed those fairies that had been getting more and more annoyed as the days passed. If they scared the Rebornians enough, it could cause the Pixie Queen to come out of her hiding and give Wayno a chance to speak with her. Boss Michael, we have some news. Naruto and Sasuke appeared in Michael's room. The two Orc Shadow chieftains bowed in respect towards him while doing their respective rituals. The Bastard Bandits have shown a lot of movement these past few days. They have started to send out their men towards the forest, setting camp in a single line towards the east. Bu-Tutu. We think that they will target the Golden Road that we are about to build there. The rumors that we spread have successfully led them where we want them to strike. Right? Michael nodded, satisfied with the two's reports. Thankfully, he had these shadow orcs to help him deal with actual reconnaissance and spying. After all, he knew that Fudge had been playing around too much to actually do a ninja's job, even though he proclaimed himself as the best one. And with the human bandit spies that they had planted weeks earlier, they were able to spread information that the Golden Road would be built just beside the cliff of the mountain. Of course, Michael chose this location because it was in a neutral territory, not too close and not too far away from the Bastard Bandits' hideout. His real goal was them, not the Golden Road. That could be arranged later when all of this was over. What more have you found out? He asked them. They were recently visited by a representative from Flare Corp, verifying the intel that they were offered to become subservient to them, Naruto said. Did you know what they talked about? We only heard bits and pieces of it, boss. Unfortunately, this visit from the Flare Corp representative was not anticipated. So, only our mid-shadows were assigned to the mission, Sasuke said, with a bit of shame in his voice. The Shadow of Orcs had a hierarchy they followed. At the very bottom of the chain was the Genin, or the Low Shadows. These were the people that only had the D to C class talent in Shadow. Because of that, the skills and spells they could learn from Michael were only simply shadow spells that were strong against normal individuals, but could easily be detected by strong people like the bandit leader. They could only learn spells like Lesser Shadow Clone, which was only limited to about 10 clones at max, and Lesser Shadow Attachment, which was easily noticeable by people when they looked at the ground and saw a completely different silhouette. So usually, the missions assigned to low shadows would be mundane spy tasks like listening to gossip around a territory or patrolling the territories of Reborn during the day and night. These were missions that needed to be done, but weren't all that important in the grand scheme of things. There were about 10,000 or so members in this rank. Although, this number was a bit inflated because of the new recruits being initiated into the shadows after Michael consolidated the territory of the grafted cluster and the shadows found talented individuals. New recruits were mandated to be added into this rank, whether they have good talent or not. Once they showed themselves as worthy and they were able to complete some missions, then they could graduate to become a Chunin or a mid-shadow. Those recruits that stayed in this rank were mostly those who had C to B class talents in the shadows, allowing themselves to be given much more complicated shadow skills that allowed for more secrecy and stealth. Michael usually assigned these shadows specific missions like infiltrating the Bastard Bandits or spying on the next territory they would go to next. These were harder missions, but completely doable. The members on this rank were only about 4,000 shadows in total, mostly of Orcanine and Orcupine orcs. After shadows proved themselves even further, then they could be promoted to Jonin or High Shadow. Now, this rank was only reserved to those that had really good talent in the shadows, mostly in the B to a rank. The skills they could learn in this rank was enough to hide from most targets, allowing for them to become completely invisible from most eyes. The missions they were assigned were high-class missions that were potentially dangerous and could affect the Reborn company as a whole. This included reconnaissance and spying high-class targets, such as the officers of the Bastard Bandits. They were also assigned protection services for important people that Michael wanted protected, like the Duke and other such allies. There were only about 1,000 shadows in this rank. Now further, this rank was something that cannot just be achieved through talent. They needed to be chosen by Fudge or Michael himself, the elite shadow force. These were the 10 or so shadows that showed exceptional will to help Reborn in all their endeavors, no matter the cost. Naruto and Sasuke, the two former orc chieftains, used this task force for missions that needed extreme secrecy and accuracy. If one of those 10 elite shadows had been in the Bastard Bandits' cave, then they could have infiltrated the conversation between the bandit leader and the Flare Corp representative without anyone noticing. It's fine. It's not like you could have known it beforehand. What's important is that we know what they're doing next, Michael said to the chieftains. The two orcs bowed their heads to Michael. We will do better, boss. After this misstep, we doubled our forces infiltrated by the Bastard Bandits, even using the elite shadow force to watch their every move. We found out that their leader, Wayno, is desperate to summon the Pixie Queen. He hopes that by scaring us Rebornians, our emotions can be enough of a bait for her to show up, Sasuke reported. And with that regards, Michael agreed. He wanted to meet with the Pixie Queen anyways, so he decided to let the bandits go ahead with their plans for now. Have you seen any signs of the fairies? The two shadow orcs shook their heads. None yet, boss. Everything's quiet with no incident. But worry not. The elite shadow force will find them one way or another. Back in the Bastard Bandits' hideout, the cave was afoot with hurried steps and busy ramblings. They were rushing to complete their preparations in the forest, creating more tunnels and traps under the ground for them to use later. Too bad for them, there were shadow orcs spying over them during the night. And during the day, when the sun was at its zenith, they didn't know that there were small bits of light under the sun that were looking over at them with mischievous smiles. The sound of the wind howling at them was really just the sound of fairies laughing to themselves with giddy joy. Hi, hi, hi. They're serving us a platter again, yippee. Food. Give us some delicious human emotions. These fairies were about as small as a finger, with most of them wearing almost moss-like dresses and clothes. Their entire bodies glowed a slight golden color, with yellow dust falling off them and dissipating in the wind. Their butterfly-like wings fluttered with excitement as they snooped on the bandits. Reborn? They're talking about these new groups of humans. I wonder if they're expressive. After the visit to the Reborn prison, Michael transported himself back to the Queen's region. First things first, he needed to actually get the Golden Road to the east first before he started thinking about dealing with the Bastard Bandits. Right now, he would let the Shadow Orcs do their thing and continue their investigation on both the bandits and the fairies. He found himself back to the mountains of the Grafted Cluster. He smiled, knowing that the undisturbed and untapped potential of this territory would soon be harvested. He walked over to a large open area where a lot of Rebornians and miners were gathered to start the day. In the middle of everyone was a Lamia woman named Priya, who had the talent to create heavy-duty oil machinery dedicated to making large-scale mining projects possible. This was the crucial part in expanding the Golden Road to the east. If they didn't have these resources to mine, then they wouldn't have enough to create the roads. Michael had given Priya all the blueprints and all the theoretical know-how to create and operate these large machineries. And with a little help from the engineers, the final product was ready to be installed in the mines. One of the large trucks carried a drill on its load, made by the finest hands of the dwarves themselves. It had finally been delivered and just needed to be set in place before it could be used. The other trucks contained the parts of excavators, crushing equipment, and loaders, which were all operated through a fuel engine, which was why there was also a gas truck that would deliver fuel on a regular basis. These machineries were hard to create since it was a completely different blueprint from the ones that the Rebornians had been making till now. It was heavy-duty, even compared to trucks. With the help of Priya, who personally traveled all the way to the nation of Reborn to cooperate with the dwarves on its creation. Then Michael would have had to step in, making him spend days or weeks to finish. Thankfully, she was there in place of Michael. She knew how they worked, so she could easily explain it to the dwarves who would make it from scratch. Meanwhile, the conveyors were easier to manufacture since they were widely used in all the factories located in the parched lands. Michael saw a lot of people working on installing these drilling systems. The construction workers used physical spells to make it easier, while the engineers used their innate skills to make sure that everything was in the right order and measurement. A few hours later, Priya was finally done doing the final checks before she approached Michael with a big smile on her face and her snake tail wiggling left and right. "Boss, we're about to start our first excavation. Would you like to see?" She led Michael down the cave of the mountain where the mine shaft was located. He saw artificial lighting illuminating the whole workplace, which was flickering on and off due to only being powered by a fuel-powered generator. They walked down the shaft until Michael saw train tracks leading further beyond. And with his enhanced eyesight, he saw the figure of the large drilling machine installed in a train-like body. He could see the light mana signatures of the miners working inside the train, pouring gas down the pipes and powering up the engine. A loud rumbling sound echoed through the chamber as the drill finally started rotating. And as the pistons thrusted in the engine, the drill rotated faster and faster until it blurred into a cone-shaped metal. The miners inside the drill train looked down the shaft towards Priya and Michael, asking them permission to start the process. With a thumbs up from their Lamia mining chief, the miners pushed the lever on the dashboard, creating a thrusting force in the drill that started to bore through the solid stone walls of the mine. As the drill tore through stone and minerals, the miners left behind began to shovel all the dust and debris onto these small chests connected onto the railway. Their bodies began to glow a red light as they used their mining-specific spells to transport more than what was physically possible. Once the mine carts were filled up, they pushed them down the shaft and out of the tunnel. As the filled mine carts came closer to Michael and Priya's position, other miners welcomed its arrival by using the physical art spell, Enhance Carry Weight, to move the carts and unload all its contents onto a conveyor belt. Their faces barely showed any effort as they lugged hundreds of kilograms on their shoulders. And as these raw ores and minerals moved through the conveyor belt, a new miner group began to scan all the contents with their glowing green eyes. With the innate skill called Inspect, or that Michael gave them, they were able to easily sort out all the raw minerals from each other and send them out into the different conveyor belts. And finally, after careful segregation of mineral and stone, the raw product was led directly into the mouth of an incinerator where it was burned in a molten form, which after cooling turns them into blocks of solid ores. We estimate that we will be able to create about 2,000 tons of material every day in this mine, Priya proudly reported, her tongue flicking in excitement. And once we have installed these machineries into the 2 other mines in the grafted cluster, we can gain an estimated 3,000 more tons, bringing up our total to about 5,000 tons. Michael was very glad to hear that. Having this much natural resources was a welcome breath of fresh air. However, he knew that he would have to let go of such a stockpile soon. "Have you talked with Shaina?" he asked Priya. "Yes, boss. She told me that they expect the materials to be delivered to Angora City by the end of the week so that the Golden Road can be started. You can handle it, right?" Priya took a deep breath. "I'm not an expert in these administrative tasks, but I have seen Senior Kong deal with these paperworks enough to know what I should do. I'll meet with our truck drivers and schedule a delivery soon," she said. Michael nodded, approving of her first work as the chief leader of the mining department of Reborn. Big title, but her talent was deserving of such big shoes. She just needed time to fill it. There was still a lot she needed to figure out, like managing all 1,000 miners under her department, or learning how to deal with the other departments who would soon pester her about wanting resources for their own projects. "Good job, Priya. Keep up the good work. I'll have to rely on you to keep production in Reborn steady," he said to her. And in response to his words, the Lamia put on a brave face. She will not disappoint Michael. After dealing with the resources problem, Michael transported himself back to Angora City for a little stroll. Walking through the streets of Angora City, Michael saw more and more automobiles riding on the roads. It wasn't just the Reborn taxis that were present. There were also more private vehicles, cars that people bought for themselves. But just like his people said, the need for automobiles was now an all-time high. Michael thought it was because of the Golden Road and its interconnectedness, but maybe the rapidly spreading religion of the Iron Maiden had something to do with it as well. As he enhanced his hearing through the wax moth ears spell, it allowed him to hear a pin drop from 100 meters away. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. A metallic divine woman showed herself that day, saving the people of the grafted cluster from the clutches of the evil Flare Corp. One man with his face painted like that of the metallic woman and wearing just a cube of metal with holes for his arms and legs, preached to a group of citizens walking through the plaza. Whoa, amazing. Not all people listened to his words, but there were enough people intently latching onto his words to make a crowd. And the automobiles you see running through the streets are her creation, her children. That is how they're able to work without horses, without magic. They're living, breathing creatures. Look at its breath that rumbles every time it starts. Look at its eyes that light up like the sun. Do you not see how they are her creation? Michael shook his head in disappointment as he heard that. Unfortunately, a lot of people believed the man's words and now treated the automobiles like sacred cows or something. And because of that, they wanted to buy an automobile, not to ride it, but to worship it. Now, Michael couldn't really stop this from happening. After all, he believed in a free world where anyone could believe in their own religion. And in all fairness, he too believed that the metallic woman he saw that day was some kind of divine entity as well. However, they were probably the cause of the large demand for automobiles in Angora City and the grafted cluster. He could understand why people buy the pricey cars in Angora City. It's a capital city, after all. People were wealthier here. But in the grafted cluster, there were a lot of settlements still using wood and thatch to build their houses. Yet, this region had the most of orders for cars than even a capital city. A poorer region like this would have needed about a year or two before it advanced enough to want cars. Even when Michael introduced automobiles to the King's region a lot earlier, it was only now did the territories become rich enough to be able to afford it. With the help of trucks, taxis, and the concrete roads, it took almost 2 years for the economy to surge enough for the whole of the King's region to become richer. Michael thought it would be the same in the Queen's region. Unfortunately, the Iron Maiden hastened this process, leading to a scarcity in automobiles. But Michael couldn't really complain. After all, more demand meant more money for the company. The problem was that they couldn't capitalize on this demand. They couldn't quite keep up. Although they had a lot of money, like a lot where Michael didn't even know where to spend them, he just couldn't find a way to get more resources for his rapidly expanding business. Automobiles were getting sold out left and right even before they were made. The wait list for getting an automobile was getting longer and longer, with people waiting possibly for months before they got their car delivered to their doorstep. And according to some of the reports given to him by the Genin or Low Shadows that were patrolling the streets of Angora City every day, there was some reselling of automobiles going on during day and night for much higher prices. Now, Michael didn't really have a problem with this. That was just how the market responded whenever there was a scarcity in products. He was just worried that the automobile was becoming less and less accessible to people because of these price tags. If he wanted to address this problem, then he would have to stop the expansion of the Golden Road and dedicate resources back to automobile production. But Michael thought that was the wrong way to do it. He needed to expand to new territories in order to find more resources. This is stressing me out a little bit, Michael thought to himself. All this internal monologue made him a little bit hungry, and since he was already here, he decided to look for a local restaurant in Angora City to eat his fill. He walked through the roads alone. He was glad that not a lot of people here knew his face, or else he wouldn't have had this peace and quiet as he strolled through the streets. He came across some Reborn engineers who were doing some scouting and estimation for the eventual overhaul of Angora City. They had just finished their work, leaving the building they were measuring, and came down to the opposite side of the street where a small eatery was located. This small restaurant was very homely, as if it was just the porch of a house renovated to accommodate only about 10 customers in total. Not only that, but the place was almost run down with chipped paint in the walls, creaking wooden floors, and almost broken down chairs and tables. The only customers inside were the Rebornian engineers and just one old man sipping water in a cup. "Boss, you're here," the engineers called out to him, finally noticing his presence. They invited Michael to their tables, and he joined them. They first talked about some stuff about work, but eventually Michael asked them this question. "Why are you eating here?" "You gotta try this chicken, boss," the hobmanki said enthusiastically. "It's really good. It reminds me of the fried chickens we had in the nation of Reborn." Michael's eyebrow raised. Fried chicken? Soon enough, though, a rugged middle-aged man and his son came out of the kitchen and brought out 2 plates of a whole, steaming hot chicken each. The engineers thanked the chef before going in and ripping out a piece for themselves. So good. Reminds me of home so much." "Boss, try it." Spurred by his curiosity and his hunger, Michael ripped out the chicken thigh, feeling the crisp crack of the skin as he took it out. Not only that, but the white meat of the chicken leaked out a scrumptious juice, making it really appetizing. He took a bite. Crunch. His eyes widened with surprise. The crunch was crunchier than anything he had ever eaten in this world or his previous one. The glaze on the skin gave his senses a hot and spicy sensation, yet very pleasing to the tongue. And the white meat itself balanced everything in the bite, completing the entire range of taste. Michael couldn't help himself and took another bite, and another. This was the most delicious piece of chicken he had ever eaten. Mitchie looked at the well-seasoned, extremely crispy chicken that he just devoured. It was completely different from the fried chickens he had consumed even in his previous life. Something about it was more exotic and therefore more novel in his tongue. Chat JK4, can you scan this chicken and find out why it's so finger-licking good? All right, scanning chicken. A few seconds later, a visual projection of text boxes appeared in his vision, with each box corresponding to a different part of the chicken. Poultry chicken, produced naturally and most probably brought up and farmed personally by the owner. Oven-baked, cooked using vegetable oil at a brisk 170 degrees Celsius. Spices, a combination of native spices emulated the same texture as fried chicken. However, there seems to be one ingredient added in the cooking process that is not in the recipe database for this type of meal. Can you figure out what it is? The spice that is used is called dragon's whiskers, which, despite its name, has no connection to the demi-human denizens of the Draconian Empire. A visual image of dragon's whiskers appeared in Michael's vision, showing him a thin green herb that strangely curved down to the root and back up, creating an illusion of a gentleman's mustache. Dragon's whiskers, a rare herb found in the forestry region in the Queen's region. This particular type of plant has adapted and mutated to have a defensive mechanism to ward off humans or animals consuming it. Upon consumption, the herb will release a particular chemical that reacts with a natural mana found inside the consumer. For some animals, consumption will result in an allergic reaction. But for humans, consumption will result in a mild, almost burning sensation to the tongue, stimulating the mana inside their cores. Just like how peppers mutated to become spicy to taste for regular humans, this dragon's whiskers mutated to become spicy to taste for magically enhanced humans. Magic capsaicin, if you will. Most evolved and magically capable humans like Michael barely felt the spiciness of peppers in this world, especially those who practice physical art spells that enhance their body's durability. This new discovery came with a new sensation. He couldn't believe that such a delicious piece of chicken was being served at a rundown restaurant with barely any customers, if any. He looked towards the kitchen area, where the rugged, middle-aged chef and his little boy worked together to fry their chickens in the wok. "Excuse me," he called out to them. The chef looked at Michael, finished his cooking, and walked over to him after wiping his hands in his apron. "Something the matter? Did you cook this yourself?" Michael pointed at the already half-eaten chicken on the plate. The Rebornians were just munching on the food continuously. "Yeah, family recipe," the chef replied. "My grandfather taught it to me." "What do you use?" "Dragon's whiskers." The chef was surprised Michael was able to figure it out. "Yeah, that's what you magicians will taste on the chicken." I heard it's extremely pleasant to eat." Meanwhile, his kid hid behind his legs and peeked out at Michael, who seemed to only be a few years older than him, yet looking so matured. "Your chicken is the best food I've had in a while. No exaggeration." Michael praised the chef genuinely. "Thanks. It pays enough for my little boy here to go to school," he said, ruffling his son's hair. Michael found it quite a shame that such a delicious piece of food wasn't getting enough attention here in Angora City. But then he realized this world was at the age where information was scarce and hard to propagate. There weren't any online review sites that could spread the good news about this undiscovered gem of a restaurant. There was only the word of mouth, and that's it. The only reason Michael was able to spread the word of the Reborn products was because he had a lot of money to burn. He could hire newspapers, town criers, and everything else. But this place didn't even have enough money to replace the broken chairs in the room. Although the food was good, it didn't matter in the end if no one knew about it. "I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Michael." He reached his hand out to the chef. "Tony," the chef replied. "And this is my kid, Remy." Michael shook his hands with Tony. "I want to offer you a deal," he said. "What deal?" "The kind that could change your life. I see that your restaurant has the potential to become one of the biggest restaurants in the world, one that would serve thousands and thousands of people every day." Remy's eyes glistened as his imagination soared from Michael's words. Yet his father was not so easily swayed. "Are you kidding me?" Tony said with a self-deprecating tone. "Don't you see there's no customers here? Unless you have the money to force people to look at this place, then you won't be able to help us." It was at this point that the Rebornian engineers all looked at Tony. "Chef, don't you recognize who you're talking to? This is our boss, Michael. He's the owner of Reborn." Tony looked at Michael with a different gaze now. Although he didn't get out much and spent most of his time in the kitchen, even he had heard of the Reborn company. Practically everyone in Angora City knew about their name and their accolades. Previously, he thought Michael was just talking big. But now that he knew that he could back it up, Tony considered Michael's offer more seriously. "What would a large company like yours want with my little restaurant? There's no upside for you." Michael disagreed. "I'm not doing charity here," he said. "I truly believe that your restaurant could become one of the biggest food businesses in the world, at least with my help. If you become a subsidiary company of Reborn, then we can help you expand your small rundown eatery into a large restaurant in the center of a city." In truth, Michael didn't have to offer Tony this lucrative deal. After all, ChatJK4 could very well reconstruct the chicken recipe by himself once he had a taste of it. He could sell it as his own and create another large subsidiary next to Reborn. But that was bad business practice. He didn't want to be like that. Is that even possible? Tony muttered to himself. He had already let go of such lofty dreams while he was a kid, and now Michael was promising him the very same thing. "Of course, once you're under my company, then I can give you all the resources you will need to further expand your business." Michael could see Tony's eyes start to light up, but then he controlled himself. "I don't want to become a large restaurant company," he said. "I just want to earn enough money for me and my kid to live as we want." The father and son hugged each other. "If that's what you want, then all right. We will take control of your company and give you a portion of the income. And not only that, but if your kid wants to join Reborn, then he can take his rightful place as the owner of this subsidiary. As an honorary Rebornian, you are entitled to some benefits," he said to Tony and Remy. The father and son duo both went wide-eyed as Michael listed out all the advantages that a Rebornian had privilege of having. Guaranteed housing in the nation of Reborn, guaranteed jobs, and a free talent awakening were just some of the things that made it all seem like a dream instead of reality. That last part was already enough for Tony to be willing to sell the entirety of his business to Michael. After all, the only reason he had been keeping up the restaurant despite it not succeeding was because he wanted to give his son a chance to awaken. But now, Michael was willing to give that as a bonus. Tony would probably faint if he knew that Michael could customize skills to give to his son. "Yes, we would like to become Rebornians." Tony was quick to change once he learned about Rebornian benefits. Even though the details of their contract still hadn't been ironed out, he was already willing to sign it even if it was unfavorable to him. "Take my recipe," Tony blurted out. Of course, Michael wasn't going to do him wrong. "No, I'm going to let you decide everything about the restaurant. You can decide what to cook, what to sell, and what to do. I'm just going to stay by the sidelines. This restaurant is still your heirloom, Michael promised him. Hear that, Remy? He says that you can awaken your talent once you turn 10. The little boy gleamed, just as happy as his father. I want to be a chef, just like you, Papa. The two hugged each other before Tony turned to Michael. There was an excitement in his eyes, a fire for cooking that had been relit in his soul. Finally, the results of all the years toiling in an unsuccessful restaurant had finally borne fruit. What should I do? I can cook about 10 whole chickens a day if I need to. Michael flashed a smile. I want you to do 100. Tony's face froze. 100? Yup, Michael nodded. And we'll create a whole new restaurant outside of Angora City in the middle of nowhere, but right beside one of the Reborn truck stops. His words felt like 1,000 tons of metal being put on Tony's shoulder consecutively. Cooking 100 chickens was already nigh impossible from the get-go. But now, Michael wanted him to sell chicken outside of civilization as well. This made him start to doubt whether Michael wanted the restaurant to succeed or to go bankrupt. In Tony's mind, if he had few customers now, he'd have even fewer customers once they moved outside a capital city. How are we going to get customers there? One of the engineers, listening to their conversation, chimed in. There are an estimated 6,000 people traveling along this particular road, and about 19,000 people traveling in total in the entirety of the Golden Road in the Queens region. Really? Tony blurted out. The sadder engineer may be munching on chicken as he spoke, but his words were nothing but the truth. ChatJK4 verified it as well. Yep, and it's estimated to grow more than that once our expansion to the east is complete, Michael added. Tony was overwhelmed by this number, but he was still skeptical about the whole plan. But what about the chicken? I don't have enough livestock to cook that many meals in a day. Don't worry about the chickens, Michael said. I have another subsidiary under Reborn that specializes in farming and livestock. Have you ever heard of Barkus Incorporated? Now, that name did sound familiar to Tony. The Barkus Incorporated? I know most high-end restaurants in Angora City get their crops from them. When they became a subsidiary of Reborn, Michael was able to see all the assets and territories under Barkus. In the luscious green forests of the grafted cluster, about 40% of all the farms and livestock present in the area were all owned by one company, Barkus Incorporated. Chickens were just one of the animals there that they had plenty of. It's not enough to last a lifetime, of course, but it's enough for the restaurant to get started. ChatJK4, remind me to have the Rebornian farmers come take a look at our farms in the grafted cluster to see if they can improve yield. Understood. Making a note of it. The only problem that I think we'll have is the dragon's whiskers. Where do you source these herbs from? Michael asked. I get it from the wet markets early in the morning. There are not a lot of merchants who sell it. There are even some days where no one sells it at all. Michael pursed his lips. Where do you think these merchants get it from? Although dragon's whiskers grow everywhere in the Queens region, it has been widely accepted that there is no feasible way to farm them. You have to find them out in the wild, which is why it is so expensive. This indeed posed a problem for the restaurant that Michael planned, at least for the long term. But short term, this problem was easy to solve. Just throw a bunch of money until it has all worked out. I'll have my people buy out every available dragon's whiskers in the market. If that's not enough, I'll just issue out a mission in the adventuring guilds. I'm sure they'll jump at the chance given enough bounties for it. Michael began to calculate everything with ChatJK4, ending up with the estimate of about 1 million gold coins should do it, Michael said out loud. His casualness and willingness to spend about 1 million gold to solve this problem truly opened the eyes of a normal human like Tony. He couldn't even fathom such a number, yet Michael was nodding his head as if it was an acceptable number. Of course, if money could solve everything, then Michael would have no problems. He wished he could just burn money and solve his current dilemmas. Either way, you don't have to worry about anything. You just need to cook and serve it to our customers. Tony couldn't even speak and just nodded his head as he gave up on questioning Michael. The boy was too rich. I'll let you deal with it, Tony said, sitting down in the chair, only for it to collapse into splinters. Michael brought Tony and Remy back to the Reborn headquarters. Of course, He let Remy take everything he wanted in the department store while he and Tony consulted with Yuna about the contract. Another subsidiary company again? Who did you hoodwink this time? Yuna teased Michael. She then turned to Tony. Be careful with this guy. He says he'll give you something, but he ends up forgetting about it. Ahem. My ice cream. Ahem. I'm working on it. Sure, you are. Yuna harumphed and turned her head away from Michael. Anyway, this is the contract for becoming a subsidiary of the Reborn company. Please sign here and here. Tony did as Yuna told him and inked his name onto the contract paper. And it was time for Michael's turn. The paper mysteriously slapped his head gently. He signed a contract, and finally, a new subsidiary was added to Reborn. Let's name your new company. What do you think of McTony's? Although Michael did get an elbow nudge from Yuna, the company name McTony's was accepted by Tony and Remy themselves. It sounded satisfying to the ear from their perspective and credited Michael for thinking of such a catchy name. But of course, he may have copied it from a very famous fast food chain from his previous life. Of course, the reason why he thought of this name in the first place was because he was planning McTony's to be the first fast food chain in the world. His plan was to create a McTony's in every single truck stop all along the Golden Road, allowing people to get the signature McTony's chicken anytime they wanted. For that to happen, though, he needed to solidify the process of procuring the ingredients for the McTony's chicken in order for it to qualify as real fast food. Over the next several days, Michael and Tony toured around the Grafted cluster to look at all the farms and livestock owned by Barkus Incorporated. Barkus himself helped Tony get acquainted with all his suppliers, mainly the chicken coops and the herb farms he was going to be coordinating with in the future. This is our chicken farm, housing about 1,000 chickens spread around different coops in the area. He pointed to the large barns in the open field, which was noisy form all the buckaws and coo-coos of the chickens inside. They walked inside and saw healthy chickens strolling across a green field of grass, pecking on the ground in search of any passing worms that might show up from below. This is where the chickens walk around during the day. When night falls, they go back to their individual coops and sleep there. And in the morning, they lay their eggs and go back to foraging for worms. On the other side of the fence, keeping the chickens in one place, was a large row of coops meant for the chickens to sleep in. Michael could even see a few eggs left behind inside, ready to be harvested. How about the chicks? Were they being raised? Michael asked. Roosters and hens are mingling in one coop. In a batch of around 1,000 fertilized eggs, then about 400 to 500 of those will grow up to become chickens if we're lucky. Michael calculated all of the factors in the chicken farm and realized that in a day, they could realistically harvest about 50 fully grown chickens for the restaurant sustainably. For now, this was good enough. After all, Michael was only planning on creating one McTony's store in the truck stop. Now, this could quickly change once more truck stops were created and more McTony's were needed, but that was a problem that could be easily solved. I'll have our agriculture department chief to survey your lands and have her give some advice on how to improve yield, Michael said, remembering his own note. There were plenty of things that could be streamlined using modern methods, such as dedicated egg sorting machines, nutritious feed for healthy egg production, and the proper way to hatch an egg with an incubator, boasting an almost 90% accuracy in growth. Thanks, Barkus genuinely thanked Michael. No problem. That's the benefit of becoming a subsidiary of Reborn. By the way, how's your brother? Bullrun's doing good, Barkus answered with a smile. He's kind of loving his time in prison. He's made new friends during board game nights. After Bullrun realized his mistakes, he voluntarily admitted himself to the Reborn prison and left Bullrun Incorporated to be managed by Michael. Because of that, Michael was able to take advantage of their assets and gather new resources from all their mines. Barkus, meet Tony. He's the one that will be needing all the chickens for our new restaurant. Both awkwardly shook their hands and introduced themselves to each other. I'll leave you guys to reach an agreement on how and when you're going to deliver the chicken and herbs. They had a lot to talk about, with Barkus mostly taking Tony under his wing and teaching him how to manage a company properly from logistics to administrative duties. Although Tony was clueless on a lot of these topics, he did his best to try and learn. Of course, Michael decided to hire some professional help for him later so that he could just focus on cooking chicken in the restaurant instead of writing paperwork. While they were talking it out, Michael visited their newly functioning mines just a few kilometers away from the farm. As soon as he ascended from the shadows, he saw Priya and the rest of the miners hard at work. Ores and minerals were constantly getting mined and processed in their new machineries. He looked to the side and saw a Rebornian truck with a large open crate on its load filled to the brim with all the processed materials from the mine. After final checking, the truck began its descent down from the mountain and into the Golden Road, where it would be delivered to its intended destination. Boss, our first shipment of ores has just left our mines. Just as you said, we distributed the first load to Angora City for the Golden Road expansion. In the 8,000 tons of material being mined every day, 4,000 of those were being used to renovate the entirety of Angora City to bring it up to Rebornian standards. 2,500 of them would be allocated to the Golden Road expansion eastward, and whatever's left would be used to create the truck stops along the Golden Road. In short, they were using up all their capacity for their current projects, which meant they had no capacity for new ones. The automobile shortage problem would have to be solved another time. But thankfully, this at least meant that the expansion eastward was finally on its way. It would still take a few weeks before the Golden Road reached the Bastard Bandits' forest territory, so Michael had some time to finish up on the first McToney's location. Michael transported himself to the very first truck stop location in the Golden Road. He was accompanied by Kong, the engineering department chief of Reborn. This is where the restaurant is going to be located, boss. The yellow Hobmanki chief used his innate skill to create a visual projection of the finished McToney's restaurant in the open lot. The modern style of architecture was very reminiscent of those fast food chains that Michael was so familiar with back in his previous life. There was even a large sign of McToney's Chicken symbol high up on a pole for everyone to see. And of course, it would be remiss if Michael didn't add the drive-through section of the restaurant. Although this wasn't technically a fast food place, yet since they still hadn't figured out how to cook the chicken really fast, Michael already integrated it into the design for the future. The design is good. Thanks, Kong. The chief engineer bowed to Michael. No problem, boss. The ores and materials are going to be delivered here soon, so have our construction workers start to dig out the foundation of the restaurant. A few days passed, and the McToney's restaurant construction was well on its way. While the Rebornian construction workers were busy pouring concrete over the foundation and laying down rebar for support, Michael met with Tony to finish up their preparations for creating the McToney's chicken. How long do you take to cook your chicken from scratch? Michael asked. I don't really know, Tony answered. Michael almost forgot that a majority of the population was still living in a timeless world. They didn't have the well-engineered clocks that the Rebornians had to check the time. To figure out the truth, Tony decided to show Michael how to make the chicken in his own kitchen, while Michael timed everything with his own pocket watch. First, I prepare the chicken, cleaning it with water and plucking out the feathers, Tony said as he took out a whole chicken from the box. With the help of Remy, Tony was able to finish the preparation of the chicken in about 3 minutes. Then, I mix all the spices together, dragon's whiskers included, and turn them into a paste that I lather all over the chicken skin. I let that marinate while I prepare the oil and the wok for cooking. Michael watched as Tony ripped the dragon's whiskers from their roots and began dicing them with his knife. A minty odor released from the herb as it got cut into pieces, with a little bit of juice being squeezed out of the plant itself. And with the combination of other spices, the signature flavor of the McToney's was created. Once the seasoning was lathered onto the chicken itself, Tony let it rest while he prepared the cooking station. He took out firewood from under his desk and began regulating the fire under the wok-like cooking pan. He then poured vegetable oil into the pan and waited about 5 minutes for the whole thing to be warm enough to start cooking. This part of the cooking process was fast considering how basic it was. The problem now laid in the cooking itself. After the oil was at its ideal temperature, Tony plunged the chicken into the oil, with some drops spewing all over the kitchen table. It then took him about 20 minutes in total to cook the whole thing before he took it out of the pan and onto a clay plate. All in all, the whole process took just under half an hour, which was the opposite of fast food. Granted, there were only two of them working in the kitchen, and one of them was a child, but the time it took for the chicken to cook would still be too long, even if they had 5 chefs cooking at the same time. Michael wanted it to be like the fast food chains in his previous world, where people would only have to wait about 2 minutes at most before they received their order. ChatJK4, can you create a cooking system that will streamline the whole process? Understood, Michael. And after a few seconds, a new vision appeared in his mind. This time, the kitchen itself was very reminiscent of the kitchens in his previous world, with large ovens, multiple cooking stations that were temperature-controlled, and even a dishwasher that could clean in a matter of a few seconds. Then, ChatJK4 showed him a video of multiple silhouettes of people working in tandem. One was in charge of plucking and preparing the chicken. One was in charge of creating the seasoning and the flavoring, and there were 5 more chefs cooking the chickens. In this arrangement, it will take about 15 minutes for a chicken to arrive at the customer after ordering. However, this arrangement is only simulated at low capacity. This means that if there are more people ordering than normal, then the waiting times could become even longer than that, which was not ideal. Why can't you cook the chicken a day earlier and just reheat it then? That was the solution fast food restaurants thought of back in his previous world. They freeze their cooked chicken and meats, and only reheat it or recook it once the customer ordered it. The effects of the dragon's whiskers will subside by then. It needs to be freshly cooked for it to retain that certain kick in the taste. After a day, it's gone, Tony answered. It seems that the methods of the fast food chains cannot be replicated in this instance. After all, that magical spice that the dragon's whiskers added to the chicken was what made it good in the first place. It's what he thought will be the reason McTony's will succeed in the future. It can't be disregarded. I guess the drive-through option of the restaurant can't open yet because of this. Despite that, Michael thought that this new cooking system will be good enough for now. 15 minutes per order will be a tolerable amount of time to wait for people. And since the dragon's whiskers taste can still be retained for the whole day without it going disappearing, Michael planned to have Tony and the other chefs prepare a lot of chicken early in the morning to stock up for the whole day. That way, people can still receive their order relatively fast. And besides, it will take some time before McTony's become popular enough for it to be filled at capacity. For now, Michael estimated that there would be around 50 customers per day that would visit the restaurant after its construction in the truck stop, which would grow more and more as the time passed. You know Shiana, right? She'll speak to you and assign some talented chefs to help you work in your new restaurant. Tony fiddled his fingers anxiously. This new restaurant, it's on the Golden Road, right? Yep. It's about 3 days' worth of travel west of Angora City. The chef nodded, with a resolute look on his face. Understood. I'll live in the desert if I have to. But can you please let my son live in your headquarters? I don't want him homeless. Michael tilted his head. What are you talking about? You'll have your own house in the truck stop itself. And not only that, but if you want to visit Angora City, then you can just drive your own car there. But I don't. Before Tony could even speak any further, Michael tossed him a small key with the symbol of McTony's engraved in front of it. That's your car. I can't have one of my subsidiary owners traveling on foot, right? Just make sure to go to the Reborn driving school before you take it out for a spin. Tony let the key fall into his palm, still disbelieving that it was real. Remy tiptoed up to his father's hands to try and look at the new key car that they had just been given. Beep, beep. They both looked outside their rundown restaurant house and saw a new automobile parked beside the streets. Its shiny polish was even shinier than any glasses they owned. A car, Remy shouted and immediately ran towards the automobile. No way. The boy had seen many of these riding in the streets and always dreamed of riding in one. He never would have thought they would own one. Tony followed behind his son with the key in his hands. He looked back at Michael, who gave him a reassuring nod. Go ahead. It's yours. Tony looked back with an awkward expression. I don't know what to say. Haha. Save it for when I awaken your talent. Awaken my talent. Michael raised his hand and used his supreme skill, gift bestowal. Tony felt a farm sensation in his chest as it glowed a bright light, intensifying until it blinded him for a few seconds. After it subsided, a new world opened up to him. Talent. B-class fried chicken chef. In Tony's chest, he felt mana condensing into a core, allowing him to feel and use mana for the first time in his life. Now, he would be able to use spells and skills to cook chicken easier and much faster than normal. Michael even gave him the skill See to Taste, allowing him to know the taste of the McTony's chicken through sight alone, giving him time to make any adjustments before it was served to the customer. Once Tony realized what Michael gave to him, what Michael awakened, a slew of emotions rushed to his face. He hugged his son and then thanked Michael. "I will make McTony succeed to repay all that you have given me," Tony promised. After just a few days had passed, the McTony's restaurant had finally finished construction. Tony, Remy, and a few other talented Rebornian chefs did their final checking before they officially opened the restaurant. This is amazing," Tony remarked, sliding his hand over the cool door of the refrigerator. "How does this even work?" The kitchen was fully equipped with fuel power machines like the stoves, the ovens, and of course the refrigerator. Your assistant chefs will help you familiarize yourself with these machines. A satyr, a dog folk, a lizard man, and a hobmanki introduced themselves to Tony. They used to be chefs back in the nation of Reborn and were just given a promotion to help Tony with the restaurant. They were all capable people that Michael personally awakened, so he knew they could run things smoothly. He also wasn't worried about Tony getting overwhelmed with the stoves and grills. After all, his talent awakening should have come with modern cuisine knowledge through ChatJK 4. "Okay," Tony said, taking a deep breath. "Let's start cooking." Like a well-oiled machine, the six of them started their own duties in the kitchen station, with little Remy helping wherever he could. Just half an hour later, the very first batches of the signature McTony's chicken were finally cooked. They piled them up in a glass container, allowing the customers to see the juicy and crunchy chicken for themselves, tempting them to order. Just a few minutes later, the first few customers finally enter the restaurant. "Hey, boss. Hey, Chef Tony. Can't wait to eat this again. I've been craving it." It was the Rebornian engineers who had led Michael to Tony's restaurant a few days back. Since the restaurant had just opened, the first few customers were only Rebornians who had heard about its opening through their own circle of friends. A few minutes later, the next group of customers came in and ordered the McTony's chicken as well. And about a few hours after opening, the first non-Rebornian customer had finally arrived. "What's this place? Ooh, that smells delicious. What is it?" About 20 middle-aged men and women entered the restaurant, almost filling the seat capacity. They were a group of people who used the Reborn buses to travel through the territories in the Golden Road as a vacation. And coincidentally, their bus had to refuel in this truck stop. While they waited, they saw this newly constructed restaurant, so they decided to take a chance and enter inside. And as soon as they saw the crispy chickens displayed on the counter, they immediately wanted to order one for themselves. "Let me try one, chef." "Actually, make it 2. No, 3. After waiting a few minutes, they were served their own McTony's signature chicken. It only took one bite, that crunch, for the people to voice out their liking for this new and exotic meal. "Give me one more." Tony's eyes gleamed in joy. This was the first time he had a lot of customers buying his chicken. The combination of wanting to succeed for Michael and the feeling of wanting to serve good food made Tony a lot more enthusiastic as he tossed the chicken on the cooking pan. "Order's coming right up," he shouted back. Michael watched a successful opening day for McTony's chicken. Although not a lot of people visited it today, it would only be a matter of time until people took notice of it. Those that did buy it promised that they would come back for more if given the chance. For now, Michael instructed Tony and the chefs to keep on cooking chicken every day. Of course, since all their appliances were connected to a generator powered by fuel, they needed to pour gas to it every day for it to keep functioning. It was especially important that they don't forget because there were a lot of frozen chickens in the refrigerator. Thankfully, they were located right next to a gas station, so they wouldn't run out of fuel anytime soon. Now, this was just a temporary solution for now, since using gas to power these machines was quite wasteful. Michael would have just to bring electricity further into the Queens region so that they would be plugged into the grid. Speaking of which, the renovation for Angora City was well on its way as well. The construction of the Golden Road to the east and the renovation of the city was being worked on at the same time, which was quite efficient but was a very expensive endeavor. They had to hire a lot of external help from the general public for the construction worker. All of them had to be paid above the standard fee, which thankfully wasn't a problem for a company like Reborn. Money was one thing they didn't lack. Because of Michael's tempting fee, a lot of people signed up for construction work. Even people who normally don't do this kind of work volunteered to go because of the good pay. I just have to carry these concrete blocks and place them in order? This is easy, one adventurer said. The gold coins he would earn from this was the same as a dangerous mission hunting monsters in the wild, with none of the risk. The first project for Angora was the construction of the sewers and the plumbing systems for each house. And since Angora City was managed by one person, the Duke, getting permission for this construction, only relied on him. "Yes, please," answered the Duke when Michael visited him in the baseball stadium's back in the nation of Reborn. "I can't live without a shower or a toilet in my castle." And without looking away from the baseball field, Duke Stelmane signed the contract Michael handed to him in a heartbeat. So I never mind. Michael almost wanted to reprimand the Duke for being too casual about things like this, but remembered that his laid-back attitude made the work a lot easier. Just like that, construction was started. He wanted the project to be done as fast as possible so that the Duke would finally return home from his super long vacation and Michael could finally relax for a change. I guess it's finally time to see if I can summon that metallic woman again. After that fateful day, when he inadvertently summoned the apparition of the metallic woman, Michael had not yet tried to use the finger gun again. First of all, he became quite busy dealing with a lot of business in Reborn, with the lack of resources and the current McToney's project. It was only after things settled down and he completed those tasks did he have enough time to sit down and try it again. Second of all, Michael wanted to make sure that he would do it away from anybody's prying eyes. If he did summon the metallic woman again, then he didn't want the new Iron Maiden religion to become even more crazed than they were right now. Whether he liked to or not, that group was spreading faster and faster throughout the southern tip of the Queen's region. This was perhaps one of the only downsides of having the Golden Road so interconnected with a lot of territories. Things like these were spreading faster than normal. Either way, after letting Shiina and the rest of the Rebornians deal with the problems of Reborn for a day, Michael found himself a secluded forestry in the grafted cluster. There was no one around him within 100 kilometers. He made sure of that by scanning his surroundings and seeing no sign of light mana anywhere. And as an added precaution, he had ChatJK alert him if anyone did unknowingly step foot close to his testing area. This secrecy wasn't just for security reasons, but also with the safety of other people. He didn't know if summoning that metallic woman would result in an unpredictable explosion of power. He didn't even have a guarantee that he could survive it himself, if that happened, much less saving an unfortunate bloke that stumbled into this forest. After all, it was clear that the power born from that metallic woman was not made out of mana. It was something completely different, which meant that it was something that not even his supreme talent could control. There is simply too much unknown about the small piece of Godforge in his heart for him to be careless about this stuff. ChatJK4, are you ready? I'm always ready, Michael. His confident and a little bit condescending personal AI assistant did give him a bit of a comfort boost. At least he knew that ChatJK4 would protect him if anything bad happened to him. Here goes nothing, Michael muttered to himself. He raised his hand, folding his fingers into a ball except for his pointy finger and thumb, mimicking a modern pistol from his previous life. All 8 cores in his abdomen began to pump out mana throughout his veins, following the magic theory that Michael constructed them to do. As the power gathered at these hands, a blinding glow of light appeared on the tip of his pointy finger. The power contained in this one small part of his body was like a ticking time bomb that was about to explode. He just needed to trigger it, and it would shoot out into a laser with unmatched power. But he waited. He didn't pull the trigger yet. Just then, he felt the change in his body. The small piece of Godforge material surrounding his heart valve began to emanate a strange and mysterious power. The sensation he felt now was extremely similar to the sensation he felt back then. Now that he was out of the heat of the moment from the battle, he could finally observe this new sensation through a cool lens. The power was definitely coming from the God-forged piece, with its metallic luster pulsating at the same time as the strange power in his body was convulsing. However, the strange thing was that Michael saw no connection between the two. There was no flow of energy that traveled from the piece to his body. It was akin to a light bulb being powered while it wasn't plugged in. It was wireless power. I don't understand how it's doing this, but if the God-forged piece can transmit power without a wire, then it's more than possible that the God-forged piece didn't have any power at all. It could be getting that mysterious power from somewhere else, essentially just acting as a transmitter. It would make sense why neither he nor ChatJK noticed anything weird when he obtained this God-forged piece. ChatJK 4, can you analyze anything? I have recorded a lot of parameters from this experiment, but without the theoretical framework for why these effects are happening, then I won't be able to figure out the true nature of this strange power. More samples of the God-forged pieces are needed. Everything that occurred after he began summoning his Unity gun happened the same way as before. There was just one stark difference. Michael looked up above him, expecting to see the bust-up image of the metallic woman looking down at him while spreading her arms. But instead of seeing a human-like figure, Michael instead saw a purely metallic contraption that looked completely alien to the inhabitants of this world, but very familiar to him. It was a gun. Specifically, it was a single-action Desert Eagle pistol, or more commonly known as the Deagle. This was one of the guns that he liked to use on one of his favorite video games in his previous life. It was the very basis for the Unity gun that he created. Whoa, Michael uttered in amazement. The large projection of the Deagle was very familiar, yet the power it held was completely alien to him. But the thing that probably amazed Michael the most was the metallic hand that gripped the very gun in the projection. It looked like a cybernetically enhanced fist that was completely clad in some sort of metallic luster the same as the Iron Maiden that appeared back then. Its knuckles were red-hot in color, with what seemed to be empty attachments on the back of its hand. He didn't think this fist belonged to the Iron Maiden at all. It looked too bulky to be her hand. He couldn't really be sure of that, though, because the solid projection of the hand started to fade off into nothingness by the time it reached the mechanically jointed wrist. The gun seems to be born from the inspiration that I drew the Unity gun from. But what about the hand? Unfortunately, ChatJK 4 was as clueless as he was. He would have to get more God-forged pieces if he wanted to find out more. But for now, he had to find out what this new projection could do. With his finger gun glowing with a bright white light, a single trigger was all it would take to release all that power into one concentrated beam. Even when he only used the bare minimum amount of mana for this spell, Michael didn't want to carelessly trigger it in some random direction. The strange power from the God-forged piece was amping its intensity by an unknown amount, so he had to take that into account. With no target in sight, Michael aimed directly above his head. At least this way, he knew nothing would get hit accidentally. As he triggered the Unity gun in his hand, Michael felt the large Deagle above his head moved to point to wherever he was pointing. Even though this metallic apparition was made out of a completely alien and mysterious energy, Michael felt somehow connected with it, as if he could command it, as if it were his own hand. The blinding light in his finger finally came to a crescendo, releasing a giant beam of pure Unity mana, destroying even that of the air mana present in the atmosphere. Its speed was as fast as light itself, reaching the heavens up above almost instantaneously. It was not something mere mortals like Michael could follow. The whole sky seemed to darken as the Unity gun continued to release energy into the atmosphere in the form of light. Then, a few seconds later, the beam subsided, leaving only white smoke leaking off of his finger. A few seconds later, the metallic apparition of the gun slowly dissipated like smoke, leaving no trace it had even existed in the first place. Michael looked at his own hands and cracked his neck. Aside from an empowered form of the Unity gun, he saw no other effect from the God-forged piece or the metallic apparition, which, to be honest, made him quite disappointed. He had a lot of expectations from the giant gun above his head, but unfortunately, it did nothing for him aside from making him look cool. So, is this projection thing just that? A projection? Just then, ChatJK4 suddenly gave him a notification in front of his eyes. God Forge progress, 3%. If I may be so bold, there is a conjecture to be had from this little experiment. Michael welcomed any input from his personal assistant. Sure, what's your thoughts on all of this? The process in which you used Unity Gun was exactly the same as when you used it the first time. However, the metallic apparitions that appeared from both attempts were completely different from each other. That's true. I was expecting to see the metallic woman as well. If you were to consider the metallic woman as some kind of god or goddess that is intimately linked to the original Godforge, then it is safe to assume that she must have stored some of her consciousness into the Godforge piece that is in your heart right now. And since she appeared only when you used a Unity-powered spell like the Unity Gun, then it can be concluded that her sliver of consciousness was somehow awakened from her slumber after sensing the presence of Unity. This is not without evidence. After all, there are records about the Unity mana, the coalition of all 8 elemental mana in the Godforge you made contact with back in the Dwarven Kingdom. The ancient dwarves were able to harness that power and change the very laws of physics itself. Michael nodded, following along ChatJK4's reasoning. What's your point? He asked. The metallic apparition that appeared above your head may not be able to show its true powers because it is not powerful enough to do so. The little sliver of Godforge piece that you have on your heart is not enough to completely manifest that strange apparition. This will be in line with the metallic woman's words. Bill me. After some thought, Michael agreed with ChatJK4's thinking. The only way he was going to find out the truth about the Godforge was to collect them all and piece them together to reform the original relic from the ancient times. Thankfully, he knew just where to get them. Meanwhile, back in the Bastard Bandits' hideout, Wayno and the rest of the bandits had just completed their preparations in the forest. The problem they now faced was information about the Reborn company themselves. What did our scouts say? Wayno asked, massaging the stump of his missing right hand. One of his officers led a group of bandits who specialized themselves in secrecy, stealth, and speed. Wayno had chosen them to spy on the Reborn company to find out where they were or what they were currently doing. It was only with this information could they successfully ambush them in the forest. Unfortunately, this simple task turned out to be Herculean in nature. Even though they'd done this task 1,000 times before and with much stronger opponents, the bandit scouts found themselves unable to find out any accurate information about Reborn. We saw them turning their golden road to the right boss Wayno. They're anticipating our ambush, one of the scouts confidently reported. Yet, Wayno was less than pleased. Are you sure? Because our previous scouts said that they were rerouting their road to the left. And the scouts before that told me that they weren't rerouting their road at all. Can anyone please tell me which is true? The bandit scouts turned silent. They were confused because they had seen it with their own eyes. They even thought to themselves that spying on Reborn was quite easy since there was no security among the Reborn construction workers. Wayno shook his head disappointedly. This means we underestimated Reborn, he said. They must have some sort of illusionist mage among them. And a good one at that. We'll send out our own illusion breaker mage boss Wayno, one of the officers said. Good, the bandit leader answered. But unbeknownst to them, any of their attempts at breaking these illusions had already failed at the start. After all, the shadows of Reborn had already found themselves attached to every single bastard bandit in existence. They knew all the moves they were going to do and plan beforehand. The Jonin, or the High Shadows of Reborn, were assigned to the mission. Their illusion skills were top-notch, especially since almost all of them had B2 class talent. Not only that, but one of the elite Shadow Force members was assigned to the bandit leader himself. Just then, the footsteps of a hurried bandit rang out inside their cave hideout. The man ran through the other bandits without care, even causing some crates to fall and shatter. But he didn't seem to care. He only wanted to go to the bandit leader Wayno and tell him of this urgent news. Boss Wayno, the bandit said, trying to catch his breath. Wayno recognized the man to be one of the guards along the perimeter of the forest itself. And if he had run all the way from there to here, then things must have been truly urgent. What is it? They're here. the forest guard bandit blurted out. She's here. And before Wayno could even clarify what he was talking about, the entrance of their cave suddenly erupted in an explosion. He saw the bandits guarding the entrance be blown inside the cave, throwing them to the walls. Wayno saw a bright light flickering from the entrance, with the shadow of a feminine woman slowly walking inside. Her footsteps were like a giant elephant stomping on his heart. Even if he hadn't seen her yet, she knew who she was. This place is wet and dingy. I can't believe you guys live here, a woman's voice echoed. She was none other than Blazel Oscorp, third in command of Flare Corp itself. The fiery woman of Flare Corp sauntered over to the bastard bandits' hideout with the bravado of someone completely confident of her stature. Her chin was perpetually turned up, as if looking down at all the bastard bandits that dared to look at her. Her orange, flaming armor accentuated the curves in her body, and despite the armor's purpose being for protection only, the woman's attire had some parts missing on a lot of strategic places that truly made her whole outfit become a lot more fashionized. Miss Blazel, I didn't know you were going to be visiting our base so soon. No warning, Wayno asked, clearly angry at the intrusion but hiding his contempt. Why can't I? Blazel said, shrugging her shoulders. This too shall be part of Flare Corp's empire in the future. I'm just here to ensure that this place is up to my cousin's standard. He is quite the stickler for these kinds of things, you know. I'm doing you a favor by coming here. I can help you reorganize and clean up all the trash here. Wayno and the rest of the bastard bandits gritted their teeth. The woman was clearly insulting their way of life. Yet, they couldn't say anything back to her. What are you all standing around for? Blazel asked, looking around at all the bandits that were just staring at her doing nothing productive. Chop chop. I'm going to clean the entirety of the southern tip of the Queen's region in order for it to be ready for Flare Corp's glory. She had a tinge of manic in her eyes. It was clear that she completely believed her own words. She truly believed that it was for the better of everyone that Flare Corp conquers them. Wayno could only just grit his teeth. He clearly didn't like this, but wasn't doing anything about it. He was complicit. But of course, that didn't mean that all bastard bandits were on board for their subordination to Flare Corp. They were against the idea, but knew that it would be stupid to provoke the ire of someone like Blazel. So, they just let out their frustrations through passing remarks. Tish, good luck getting rid of Reborn, one of the bandits muttered. Although there were plenty of other people talking in hushed voices, this particular sentence was loud enough for it to echo all along the cave and eventually reach the ears of the Flare Corp woman. What was that? She asked, directing her glare everywhere. What's this about Reborn? The bastard bandits all looked at each other, confused. They would have thought that a capable woman like her would know about the biggest phenomenon right now in the entirety of the southern tip of the Queen's region. They especially would have thought that Flare Corp would take notice of this company after they had publicly defeated them for the possession of the grafted cluster. This particular story hit the newspapers as soon as the survivors of the incident were able to get the word out. They talked publicly about how they were imprisoned in a flaming sphere, unable to get out, and were forced only to consume bland, flavorless Flare Corp products for sustenance. It lowered the public perception for Flare Corp, but increased it for the Reborn Company, at least here in the Lower Queens region. You don't know about the Reborn Company? Wayno asked Blazel. Who or what is that? The woman seemed genuinely curious. They're the 450th rank company in the Golden 500, one bandit said. But that's old news. They're due for another increase in the rankings after they absorbed Barkus Incorporated and Bullrun Incorporated as their subsidiaries. Both are in the top 500, so they will definitely move up by double digits, another bandit added. This seemed to have confused Blazel more. They have the biggest market share in Angora City and in the grafted clusters, Wayno mentioned. It was at this point that Blazel turned to look at the bandit leader. But that's impossible. We conquered the grafted cluster. Hestu assured us that we have no competition in this place. You must be mistaken, Blazel asserted, shaking her head in denial. I don't know what to tell you, Wayno said. Just see for yourself. He tossed a bundle of newspapers in her feet, which unfolded to let her see the very front page. Reborn liberates grafted cluster. Flare Corp ousted. She picked up the newspaper from the ground and began reading through it. Her eyes widened as the words in the report were completely different from the one that Hesta told them in their meeting. "No," Blazelle muttered, her voice almost in a growl. She wanted to deny it, but the evidence was right in front of her eyes. Hesta betrayed them. "Bastard!" she screamed. Her hands began to tremble as she held the newspaper with her very skin starting to glow orange. Her hands emitted a flame, turning the paper into mere ashes in a matter of a single second. She didn't know what to be mad at. First, she couldn't believe that a prestigious officer like Hestu would have the gall to lie directly in her face. That rat bastard. He must have failed in his mission and left me to clean up for his mess. In her mind, the reason why Hesta neglected to mention the Reborn company was because he failed in his task, not because he betrayed the company. After all, she couldn't think of any justifiable reason to turn away from the glorious company of Flare Corp. And it was with this pride that she failed to consider the fact that Hestu turned into a traitor. If she had, then she could have warned her fellow officers back at Batroc Town and had him executed for treason. Unfortunately for her and the rest of Flare Corp, Hesta would remain as an agent of the one called the Slime God, doing his bidding under the shadow of darkness. Meanwhile, Blazelle felt intense anger and rage rising within her, bubbling up to the surface. Just the thought of Hesta's face almost made her blood boil into steam. "Grahhh!" She screamed out into the cave, with her shout echoing back at her. Wayno and the bastard bandits remained locked in their positions as Blazelle let out her frustrations. The crazy woman screamed at the top of her lungs, stomping her foot on the ground angrily. This went on for a few seconds before she turned silent. Just when they thought she would finally calm down, Blazelle took out the rapier from its scabbard and raised it up into the air. Suddenly, the air turned hotter, denser. Wayno and the rest of the bandits felt the air moving around Blazelle as if she was in the eye of a tornado. Blazelle's shadow flickered as her body began to glow with her own fire. As she continued on this rampage, the elite shadow orc tasked to monitor her suddenly felt a strange force repelling him away from her feet. It was unlike anything he had ever felt before, and before he knew it, his lesser unity defense activated and started to repel the fire. Yet, the shadow orc could only watch with wide eyes as his greatest defense started getting chipped away by Blazelle's fire. The elite shadow orc's pride as a ninja flared up, making him want to fight against the fire and light of Blazelle's fury. He wanted to gather all of his strength and sustain the lesser unity defense that protected him all this while. But surprisingly, his defenses were getting whittled down slowly. As the fire in Blazelle's body burned even brighter, it would only be a matter of time until there was a hole in the invisible prismatic shield that protected him. That would not be ideal. After all, part of the reason why they were even able to stealth around in other people's shadows was precisely because of the lesser unity defense that they innately had on their bodies. It was able to destroy or nullify any magical scans or investigations that would have otherwise discovered them. And if his lesser unity defense was broken, there was a huge chance that Blazelle would discover him, and therefore discover the presence of the shadows of Reborn. That cannot happen at all costs. He had to make a choice. The elite shadow orc chose to abandon his post, leaving Blazelle's very own shadow. And for security's sake, he motioned for the other shadows in the bastard bandits' hideout to leave with him and not risk the chance. Blazelle's power was not something they expected, which meant that it was not something they could measure. If it could burn through the lesser unity defense like that, then there was a chance that she could find out the truth about the shadows of Reborn. About 100 Chunin, mid-shadow, 50 Jonin, high shadow, and 2 elite shadow force members retreated from the bastard bandits' hideout, not even leaving a shadow clone behind. This would be the first failure of the shadows of Reborn. Even though they successfully retreated before anyone even found out they were there in the first place, the elite shadow force members felt like they had failed Michael since they weren't able to find out how Blazelle was able to emit that kind of power. It was a power that not even their own mana could sense. It was as if it was a different power altogether, something alien, something foreign. And before the shadows truly left, the elite shadow orc took one look back at Blazelle. Her body was glowing as if her skin was on fire. The illumination of her anger allowed no shadow to form inside the cave, making every bandit squint as she became too blindingly hot for them to look at. Grah! Blazelle screamed one last time, her shout lingering, releasing all of her anger onto the cave. And before the whole place lit ablaze with a light so blinding, Wayno and the bandits nearest Blazelle suddenly saw a mysterious form appear above her head. It felt like the very personification of fire had come down and blessed Blazelle with the power to burn even more brightly than the sun itself. And at the end of her shout, slowly the light and fire subsided. Blazelle's body slowly started dimming as she tried to catch her breath. The strange power that overcame her body began to vanish as well, leaving behind only burn marks in a circle around her feet. Some unfortunate bandit who got too close to her suffered multiple burns all over their body. But Wayno, the bandit leader, couldn't seem to care at all. He kept looking at the empty space above Blazelle's head. There was nothing there, yet Wayno was sure he saw some kind of apparition or some kind of figure appear above her. And despite squinting, his powers of observation allowed him to figure out that Blazelle's overwhelming power of light came from none other than the mysterious figure that appeared above her. It was that fiery figure that was the source of all the non-mana power she emitted. H.A. Blazelle panted. Damn it, Hestu. He made me summon my diva. She raised the rapier in her line of sight, looking at the blades and its orange handle for any signs of damage. She gritted her teeth when she saw a slight burn mark on the lower part of the knuckle guard. Wayno, overcome with curiosity, spoke up. Miss Blazelle, what was that? He asked with caution. The Flare Corp woman looked around the room and saw the bandits look at her in a completely different light. Back then, they stared at her with disdain and mockery with no sense of respect for her stature as the third in command of Flare Corp itself. But now, all she could see were gazes filled with fear and unease. They were terribly frightened at the so-called diva that she summoned and the unknown power that it held that was completely different from the one they knew all their lives. That image of that fiery figure above her head would forever be burned into their minds. Oomph. Now you understand the true power of a woman like me, Blazelle said with a chuckle. What you saw, there is something called a diva. It is not something that any of you can just obtain for yourselves. It is reserved only for magnetics or chosen ones like me. You must have noticed it by now. My power is not something you can even detect. It is completely different from mana, meaning that you measly physical and mystical art spells cannot defeat someone like me. That is why we are superior. Flare Corp is superior. Get that through your heads. If you surrender yourself to our company, then maybe you too can wield this power in the future. Her last words sent a wave of shock and longing into these bastard bandits. The temptation of having that power, that diva, overcame their pride as a lone bandit and allowed them to finally accept being subordinated to Flare Corp. If you bastard bandits help us conquer the southern tip of the Queen's region, then we shall reward you with a chance. If you help us overthrow the Reborn Company, then we shall test if you are magnetic yourself. And if that test succeeds, then you will be given a priceless treasure by our king. You will be given a God-forged piece like I have been. Blazelle slightly ripped away the armor in her chest, revealing a surgical scar that spanned an entire finger length. Once you have undergone the procedure, you can awaken your own diva, Blazelle shouted, raising her rapier up in the air. A simmering fire suddenly erupted above her, creating an amorphous figure of flames and inferno. This apparition had no eyes nor face, just a head, an upper body, and two flaming, handless arms. This diva's true power can only be controlled using a mithril relic, Blazelle said, waving her rapier in the air. And consequently, the flaming apparition above her raised its arms and followed her movements. But not just any mithril relic. It must be added with the spirit of old, or more commonly known as the oil of old. Wayno's eyes widened, recognizing that name. It was a very exotic and rare ingredient only found in the deepest depths of the seas, distributed only by the Ocean King and his territories. Because of this, the price of the oil of old became extravagant enough for only billionaires to be able to afford. Was that the reason why Flare Corp wanted to conquer the southern tip of the Queen's region? The impressive show of force from Blazelle and the tempting power she presented to the bastard bandits effectively turned the tides of their opinion. At first, almost all of them were completely against the subordination of their group into Flare Corp. But now that they saw what Blazelle was capable of, what Flare Corp was capable of, they understood that they had no chance against them in a straight-on war. She was just the third in command, meaning there were two more powerful people above her. Yet, the bandits knew that the strange apparition of fire standing guard above her was enough to decimate them all. It threw away everything they knew about power and mana. It was the equivalent of seeing true magic in a magicless world. And what they don't understand, they fear. Blazelle was able to take control of the bastard bandits and use it as her own army. In truth, she was just here to consolidate the territories and prepare them for the arrival of Flare Corp. But nobody knew that Hestive failed in his mission. Now, she had to clean up his mess, starting with the one called Reborn. She can't wait around for them to appear here in the forest. She had to strike them while they were unprepared. "Tell me everything about Reborn," she demanded. The bandit scouts told her everything the public knew about Reborn. Their expansion into Angora City and the Grafted Cluster, their strange, innovative products, and most of all, their Golden Road project. A Golden Road project? Blazelle uttered. Is it a coincidence, or is he part of the race? She asked herself. It doesn't matter. It will all falter in the face of Flare Corp anyway. If they have already started their Golden Road project, then we shall destroy its reputation. By the time my cousin arrives, this southern tip must be cleansed of all things Reborn. Blazelle shouted orders at the bandits, who quickly accepted her words. Wayno, the bandit leader, could only stand around in the sidelines and watch as the bastard bandits got turned into Flare Corp's possession. Harass all travelers using the Golden Road. That ought to make them distrust Reborn. In all the years of the bastard bandits' history, they had always stayed within the protection of the forest and the fairies. It was what made them hard to get rid of. But now, Blazelle was taking out their territorial advantage and attacking Reborn in their own turf. He knew Reborn. Despite them acting as a peaceful merchant company, there were a lot of rumors about their impressive firepower. Mithril artifacts, for instance. They had a lot under their sleeves, and they wouldn't simply just stand around while their territories got attacked. Case in point, he knew Sleazy had gone off on his own and tried to attack Reborn, and he ended up disappearing from the face of the earth. Things could end up the same as that. Michael transported himself to the truck stop in the Golden Road right in front of McTony's. When it first opened up, the restaurant saw no more than 50 people a day. For Tony and Remy, these many customers was already well above what they had back in their run-down little restaurant near the slums of Angora City. They were already quite satisfied if this were to continue day in and day out. But just after a week of its opening, they saw their numbers jump up to almost 100 customers. The fact that McTony's was located in the middle of nowhere made this even more impressive, since there was less foot traffic here. Michael visited on the peak hour, just after the sun had set. Travelers and merchants used this truck stop to camp and sleep in for the night. And when they saw a restaurant open, they decided to eat in before going to bed. So, the restaurant capacity of 50 seats was nearly filled, with just a few vacant positions left. Michael walked in and saw Tony and his kitchen staff hard at work, tossing pans with a raging fire almost reaching to their heads. Even when they used spells like cook evenly and automatic stir to make work more efficient, it seemed like it still wasn't enough. "Excuse me, I'd like to order a McTony's," one of the customers on the counter shouted, trying to get the chef's attention. Just then, he saw a small boy use a small stool to reach eye level with him. "All right, sir," Remy adorably said. "I'm sorry, but you will have to wait 15 minutes for your order. Is that all right?" The man wanted to complain, but saw how much the chefs were working hard to fulfill orders. He also didn't want to be the guy to lecture a little kid, so he just nodded and waited like the other customers. He consoled himself with the fact that McTony's chicken was worth the wait. A lot of customers today, huh? Michael approached the counter, with Tony and the Rebornian chefs greeting him with a strained smile. "Michael, you couldn't have come a worse time," Tony said, juggling 2 pans of chicken in his hands at the same time. "I can't believe it, but this is the first time that the restaurant has been filled to capacity. I know I should be happy, but this is stressful, haha." Despite his complaints, Tony saw joy in his work. For the first time, he saw how much people loved his chicken. "Any problems with the ingredients?" Michael asked the Rebornian chefs assisting Tony. "Not yet, boss. We still have a lot of chickens in our freezer, and we have more coming in tomorrow delivered for Barker's Chicken Farms. However, we didn't expect the customers to increase this much. Our stock of Dragon's Whiskers is getting low." Michael had Tony and the other chefs coordinate with all the merchants in the Kings and Queens region for any Dragon's Whiskers that they had in store. When the store first started, the stock lasted well enough. But now that their restaurant had filled capacity for the first time, it seemed that they would need a lot more than that to satisfy demand. The chefs gave Michael some paperwork that graphed the rapidly increasing customer base of McTony's. According to their projections, this wouldn't be the first night where they would get this much customer in the peak hours of the afternoon. "I'll have Shina contact some of the adventurer guilds in the Queens region and formally issue a mission for Dragon's Whiskers." With the extravagant fee they posted, their stock of Dragon's Whiskers would at least be able to give them a stock for a few months. Just then, the restaurant door opened and a group of customers entered inside. The excitement was clear on their faces. Anyone could tell that they were returning customers of McTony's. However, the smile on their faces soon turned into disappointment when they realized that the restaurant was filled with people. There were no more seats left for them. "Oh, damn. Guess we'll have to come back another day." Michael heard this and turned to Remy. "Are they always leaving like that?" "They don't have any places to sit," answered innocently. It was then that Michael remembered an important aspect of fast food restaurants: takeout. But it was in that exact moment that Michael saw a shadow emerge from his feet. Michael moved to a more private location. Once he was alone, shadows from the corner appeared in front of him and turned into the shadow orcs. He thought it was just a routine report, but he was surprised to see 3 orcs appear in front of him. It was Naruto, Sasuke, and another orc whose shadow robe outfit didn't seem to be in good shape. Most of the silk material had been burned away, leaving holes all around his uniform. What happened to him? Michael asked immediately. The prospect of a Rebornian getting hurt without his knowledge was something that immediately tugged at his attention. Using his supreme talent, he scanned the orc's light mana, seeing if there was any danger to his life. Thankfully, though, aside from a few burn marks in the skin that was already halfway healed, the orc was in relatively good shape. However, the fact that he was even hurt in the first place was a little bit worrying. Aside from the fact that his lesser unity defense was broken through, a shadow orc should have all the tools he needed to escape untouched if he wanted to. Meaning, this shouldn't have happened. The 2 shadow orc chieftains kneeled in front of Michael and apologized. "Bu-Tutu, it is with our greatest dishonor to report that we have failed in our mission. Even our elite shadow force were not able to infiltrate our enemies," Naruto said, slapping his breast muscles harshly. "Tell him what happened," he instructed the shadow orc. The injured orc bowed to Michael. "Bu-Tutu, the task that my superiors had assigned to me was to closely monitor the actions of Blazel, the 3rd in command of Flare Corp." He began to describe in detail everything that the orc shadows had seen just a few hours ago. He told Michael about the meeting with the Bastard Bandits and her failed attempt at gaining control over their group. It was only when she became angry did she unleash a power so great that even we cannot withstand it. I was attached to her shadow, so the power I felt was even more amplified than normal. My lesser unity defense tried to protect me from the flames, but was unable to withstand its strange power. There were flames, yet it was not made out of fire mana. I had to make a split decision. In the end, I chose to retreat all shadows from the Bastard Bandit hideout in fear of getting discovered. It is my failure that I was unable to gather more information about Blazel and her strange power. The shadow orc kneeled and waited for punishment. Yet it did not come. Michael heaved a sigh of relief. It doesn't matter. As long as you are all well and good, then the mission doesn't matter. Your lives are more important than anything else, he reminded them. But Tutu, we are grateful. Ra-ta-ta. I am even more grateful. Michael didn't even consider it as a failed mission. After all, Blazelle was the third in command of the entire Flare Corp army. Of course she was strong. The fact that they could escape out of there unscathed, and without Blazelle even knowing about their existence, already spoke to how competent they were at their jobs. However, from the Shadow Orc's description, Blazelle's power didn't seem to come from her magic at all. It was something else entirely that even his lesser Unity defense could not counter. What exactly did you see? Michael felt his intuition going off. There was something familiar and unfamiliar about Blazelle's power. I was only able to take a glimpse from afar, the Shadow Orc answered. A figure made out of flames appeared hovering above her. It looked surreal. It cast no shadow, and it didn't get illuminated by the oil lamps around it. And most of all, it had no presence of mana at all. Nothing. Michael felt his heart pumping loudly. He looked down at his chest and felt it with his hands. This wasn't just a normal heartbeat. It was the Godforged piece trying to tell him something. The thought had already crossed Michael's mind, yet he just couldn't believe it yet. There were too many unknowns. However, his intuition was telling him Blazelle had a God-forged piece of her own. And not only that, but she was also able to summon her own apparition. A whole plethora of questions appeared in Michael's thoughts. Was this normal? Were all God-forged piece owners capable of summoning their own apparition? Did they meet with the metallic woman as well? These questions appeared on Michael's mind, yet he was incapable of answering them. But there was one thing for sure. This is the secret of the God-forged pieces, Michael realized. This is why the corporations who hoard God-forged pieces distribute them to their heirs and successors. The power held in these supernatural metal materials was something that could bypass any and all sorts of magical spells or defense. It was something that defied all logic, needing no mana at all to show a tremendous force of power. Our Shadow Orcs have also heard chatter from the bandits that went outside. They are planning on attacking the Golden Road and all its travelers as a way to discredit us, Naruto reported. Although Michael wasn't a fan of violence, he wouldn't back down from a fight, especially if he already had a reason to confront her. If Blazelle was planning on attacking them, then he would finally have an excuse to fight against her. And whether she wanted to or not, he will find a way to make her answer everything she knew about the God-forged pieces. He was only able to summon the metallic apparition through the use of his Unity gun, which was a combination of a mystical and physical art spell that utilized the Unity mana. However, Blazelle, and presumably others, were able to find a way to bypass that and summon their own apparition even if they could not wield Unity mana. All of his questions could only be answered by someone like her. Summon the Dragonborns, he said to the Orcupine chieftain. If they want to fight on our turf, then we'll give them what they want. Ra-ta-ta, Sasuke roared in excitement. We shall have our high shadows and mid-shadows lure the bandits to a secure location. Naruto, go to the nation of Reborn and bring out the bandit prisoners. Tell the Centaur guards that this is urgent. They will know what to do. Bu-tu-tu, Naruto shouted back. I shall not disappoint you. Now, the elite Shadow Orc was the only one that remained. Are you injured? Michael asked him. No, boss. Please let me participate in this and allow me to redeem myself. The Orcanine Orc's ears were practically drooped down once he thought Michael wasn't going to assign him a mission. Michael couldn't really deny the guy after seeing the eagerness in his eyes. And since he didn't have any serious injuries, Michael relented. Go to Neo Orcus and seek out Beth in the chocolate factory. Tell her that I'll meet with her soon to talk about our products. Michael transported himself near the forest of Neo Orcus. There he saw a large factory building with white smoke rising from the chimneys. The scent of a rich and sweet mixture wafted over his nose, the smell of chocolates. This was the chocolate factory where they turned the native cacao seeds into delectable sweet snacks that everybody seemed to enjoy. Chocolates was actually one of the most sold products in Reborn. Not only was it loved by the general public, but its public perception as an energy booster helped it become a mandatory snack for the knights and other fighting-related jobs. Even adventurers used it as their sustenance whenever they were off on missions for long periods of time. But because of its demand, there were some troublemakers who wanted to get it directly from source. But of course, the factory was tightly guarded, with Rebornians positioned all around the walls surrounding the building. There were watchtowers pointing lights all over the corners, making sure there was no one there plotting to rob the place. The guards bowed as he walked inside the building. Inside, he saw Rebornians garbed in white safety coats and glasses. After all, processing chocolates needed a lot of heat and steam, which can create a lot of accidents. Michael walked past conveyor belts with a worker magically using the mechanical spouts to pour perfectly portioned liquid chocolate into a mold. This would then get transferred over to the next machine, where it would get cooled and packaged by a Rebornian into a wrap. The workers bowed and gave Michael a smile as he walked past them. Since he already announced his arrival, the guards guided him to the top floor where the offices were located. Michael knocked on the door and opened it, seeing Beth in her baking attire with oven mitts in her hand. She had just finished cooking a batch of cookie chocolates. Even though this was an office, Beth had it retrofitted to become a bakery where she could experiment with new recipes to sell. "Michael, it's great to see you. Come have a try of this," she said, giving Michael a freshly baked chocolate chip cookie. He tasted it and knew that her skills had improved since the last time he saw her. "This is good, but this is not actually what I came here for," he said to her. "I'm here for the concentrated chocolates." Beth nodded and immediately walked over to her cabinet to take out a metal box containing 5 separate chocolate bars. Each bar turned darker from left to right. "Just as you have ordered, we have been doing experiments to make the chocolate more concentrated than the last," she said, bringing up the lightest colored bar on the box. "This is our normal chocolates, the one we sell to the general public. It contains 25% cacao concentration." Michael nodded. This was the normal amount of cacao that they sold everywhere. According to their research, it was in this concentration where it was chocolatey with not much bitterness to consume. But for Rebornians, it was a whole new different story. After all, Michael gave them all a skill called Sugar Rush, allowing them to increase their mana efficiency, mana consumption, mana power, and everything else upon consumption of a chocolate bar. Right now, the 25% cacao chocolate allowed each Rebornian to increase their power by 1-star realm. If they were 3-star magicians, they would turn into 4-star magicians upon consumption. Michael still wasn't satisfied with this, however. He wanted to see what would happen if they increased the concentration of the cacao chocolates to the Sugar Rush skill. The first result was disappointing. Just putting more cacaos into the recipe only resulted in a very marginal increase in strength. Thankfully, though, after many iterations and experiments from Beth and the rest of the talented bakers in the factory, they were able to make their first breakthrough. By compressing chocolates into a much denser material, while still adding in more ingredients, they were able to create a 35% cacao concentration chocolate. It still wasn't enough to improve power by 2-star realms, but it was enough to almost reach it by just a hair. "This is our very best chocolates," Beth said as she showed Michael the darkest chocolate bar with the number 35% stamped on top of it. "How much do we have right now?" he asked her. "We have about 5,000 in stock, and we can rush production for another 1,000 today if we shut down all normal chocolate production." "That's enough for now," Michael said, pocketing the chocolate in his inventory. "Can you make more in the future?" "The problem is with our current stock of cacaos. Creating the 35% concentrated chocolate needs about twice the amount of cacao needed for a normal chocolate. And the sacred trees of the orcs are only limited in amount. If we were to focus on the production of concentrated chocolate, we won't have enough to satisfy the demand of our customers." Although the sacred cacao trees from the orc tribes were numerous, it was still limited. And the cacao trees that were planted back in the nation of Reborn still wouldn't mature for another few years before it was able to bear fruit. "I'll ask, and if she could plant more cacao trees back in the parched lands so that we won't have this problem in the future," he said, making a mental note. I'll have the shadow orcs come and pick up the 35% chocolates to distribute among our forces. Thanks for your help, Beth. No problem, Michael. Come by if you want some freshly baked cookies. Meanwhile, the bastard bandits had set off from the safety of their forest and ventured into Reborn's territory. They stalked the Golden Road deep into the night, hoping to catch straddlers that were easy prey. However, they were horrified to find out that each of those automobiles could ride faster than even an arrow. They zoomed through the flat roads, leaving the bandits unable to catch up to them with their horses. Eventually, one of their scouts came back from Angora City. The man had been walking into taverns and trying to find more information about Reborn and the Golden Road. It didn't take long before the conversation ended up at the truck stop. Truck stop? The bandits questioned. Is it a new town? The scout clearly didn't know as well. It doesn't matter what it is. What's more important is that they are property of Reborn in the Golden Road. I heard there's a lot of people going there and camping to sleep. With no luck robbing the people driving in the roads, the bandits decided to travel to this so-called truck stop 4 days on end. It took them a while, but they finally reached their destination. And there, they saw a bustling community of automobiles and people alike. Cars were going in and out of the truck stop, with most parking their cars on the designated spots and leaving to enter an establishment on the side. McTony's, the bandits muttered to themselves. There were a lot of people inside. A lot. And they were just there like sitting ducks, ready to be robbed. With a silent nod, the bandits approached the busy building. Once Michael had everything prepared, he returned back to McTony's to settle his unfinished business. Specifically, he wanted to talk to Tony and the others about customers being able to take out their order and eat it on the go. He appeared once again during the night, at the peak hours of the restaurant. Tony, Remy, and all the chefs were busy serving out chicken after chicken without any pause. But at least now, they seemed prepared to handle these many customers. After that day, when they reached full capacity of customers, the next several days continued to be like that as well, giving them time to adjust to the workload. Michael looked out the counter and still saw some people entering the restaurant and leaving disappointed once they saw they had no seat left to sit in. "We need to talk about ordering takeout," Michael said. "There's a lot of wasted business once people leave without being able to eat a single thing." Tony was able to find some downtime as the chicken cooked in the pan. "Takeout? What's that?" But before Michael could say anything to him, a shadow emerged in front of him, with an orc appearing right in the middle of the kitchen floor. "Boss," the Orcanine orc said, kneeling. "The bandits have finally reached this part of the Golden Road. They are currently targeting this restaurant as we speak." That finally got Tony's attention. "Bandits? They're coming here." Michael waved off Tony's concerns. "We have it under control," he said nonchalantly. "As I was saying, I think it's time we implement a takeout system for customers that can't sit inside the restaurant. I'll have some Rebornians create takeout boxes." "What are you talking about right now? Don't we have to worry about the bandits?" It was at that moment when the door to the restaurant was busted wide open, with a bunch of roughly dressed individuals walking inside with swagger in their steps. They did nothing to hide the sharp weapons holstered in their waists, and even proudly displayed it to everyone who wanted to see. The customers frowned at the entrance of these new people. The fact that they didn't line up at the counter to take their order meant that they were not here for the chicken. They were here for something else entirely. The 10 or so bandits spread themselves around the restaurant, covering every corner, window, and exit. They leaned into these escape routes casually, but it was clear that they would not hesitate to resort to violence if one wanted to get past them. The bandit with the bandana on his forehead walked on top of a table, never minding the fact that there was still chicken on the plate. "Okay, don't panic, people. This is a robbery," he announced. The customers all froze in their seats as the other bandits reached out for their knives and presented its sharp blades to the crowd. "Don't move from your seats if you don't want something bad to happen. If you try to run, we have more people waiting outside," he said, pointing his knife at the windows, showing more bandits leaning on the glass. "Just do as I say, and no one gets hurt, understand?" The customers had no other choice but to nod their heads and comply with the bandits. Meanwhile, Tony was able to witness as the bandits took the entire restaurant hostage. The whole place was surrounded by bandits. "Oh no, Remy, hide," Tony said to his son, who was hiding behind his legs. "Michael, just please ensure that my son is safe from them." The dogfolk assistant chef approached Tony with a reassuring smile. "There's no need to worry, Tony. You're a new Rebornian, so you don't understand, but the safest place in the entire world is right next to where our boss is. There's nothing to worry about." Tony looked at all of them and saw no sign of distress in their faces. The Rebornian chefs continued to cook chicken as if nothing was happening, and Michael was still talking about the takeout system even during this entire situation. "We have been preparing for their arrival for a few days now," explained the shadow orc. "This is within our estimations. And besides," Michael said, pointing at the two particular customers sitting at the tables, "I have someone there that I trust completely. They'll take care of it." Now let's talk about the takeout wrappers. Tony didn't know if he should be awed or worried at Michael's nonchalance to the whole situation. Back to the hostage situation in the restaurant. The bandana bandit silently signaled the other bandits to take out their large rucksack bags. "I want everybody to take out all your jewelry, your coin pouches, and everything valuable on your bodies. Set them down at your table and put your heads down. If you do, then our bandits will not attack you as we collect the money." There was no hesitation for some customers. They hurriedly took out their coin pouches and put it on the table, with its hefty catching ringing out on the table. These were the people who valued their lives more than some gold coins. But for other people, they were less than inclined to give up their life savings to the bandits. To quell any ideas of rebellion, the bandana bandit stabbed his knife on the table, just missing the reluctant man's hands. At that point, everybody was convinced to give up their possessions in exchange for their safety. "Okay, put your heads down," the bandit commanded. Everyone did. They buried their heads on the table and hoped that this whole thing would be over fast. The bandits began collecting all the jewelry and valuables on the table. However, it was only now in the silence of the room did the bandits notice that there was a table who didn't comply with their rules. Two people were sitting facing a wall, with their heads still clearly up and with no valuables on the table. Not only that, but the two of them had the audacity to continue eating fried chicken without a single care in the world. This is so good, bro. I can't believe Bro Mike has been hiding this restaurant from us. Yeah, I want this every day." The bandits looked at the two demi-humans and didn't recognize their species. Their bodies were full of scales like a snake, yet their heads were more like that of a lizard than anything else. "Didn't you hear what I said?" questioned the bandana bandit, brandishing his knife near the dark blue-scaled demi-human's neck. "Lower your heads, or I'll cut your necks." But in response to that threat, the two of them kept munching on their fried chickens as if the bandit was even less than wind. In the silence, the crunch of the chicken resounded out through the restaurant, confusing all the bandits. These people must be wrong in the head for acting like this in a robbery. "I want to finish this quickly so that I can order one again," said Zion, wiping his mouth filled with sauce. "All right," Jaka replied while stretching. "I'll take this first one, you do the others." The bandana bandit finally had enough. "I warned you," he shouted, thrusting his knife toward Jakku. The 4-star spell, Thunderous Burglary, erupted within the knife, creating yellow electricity that surrounded the very blade itself. With the speed of thunder, the knife reached Jakku's side in a matter of milliseconds. Clink! A sword coming from below Jakku's elbow parried the knife, preventing the blade from going any further. The bandit's eyes widened as he looked at Jakku, who was suddenly wielding a sword out of nowhere. The bandit didn't even see him have a sword in the first place. Not only that, but with the very short distance it had to travel, the bandit thought his knife would surely pierce through the demi-human scales. The worst part was that Jakku hadn't even turned around yet. He was still taking his last bite of the chicken in his hands, with the sword just positioned on his side, near his elbow. Tisk impressive. But that exchange alone let me know you're just a 3-star swordsman. That's not good enough. The bandana bandit retreated his thunderous knife. His feet and arms began to emit electricity as well, giving him a boost in both speed and power. He thrusted his knife to Jakku's shoulder, but the Dragonborn finally turned around and deflected off the knife with the flat side of his blade. The thunderous knife slid and thrusted into the wooden table. The whole structure exploded into a million charred splinters as electricity coursed through it from the knife. Jaka got up off his seat and faced the bandana bandit, who smiled and flipped his knife in the air. As a piece of wood fell from the ceiling and hit the ground, the bandit rushed to Jaku with bloodshot eyes. He thrusted the knife to Jaku's stomach, with the Dragonborn parrying it with an upward swing. The bandit moved closer, using the close quarters combat to his advantage. His knife was very easy to maneuver, allowing him to create a relentless flurry of thrusts. Each strike was parried by Jaku, with the clashing of their blades creating sparks that flew around the restaurant. The bandit's unrelenting flurry of attacks forced Jaku to continue to move backwards. Each of the bandit's thrusts allowed him to take one step closer to Jaku until the Dragonborn was standing behind a table of innocent bystanders. He stepped in and pushed his knife to Jaku's neck, parried only by Jaku with his downward swing. The bandit rushed again, intending to hit Jaku's left ribs. If the Dragonborn dodged this, the knife would slip past him and hit the innocent people sitting at the table behind him. So instead, Jaku used the flat of his blade to stop the knife dead in its tracks, perfectly keeping it in place and creating a pause in the fight. The bandit used this opportunity to rush his knife before Jaku could reposition his sword, intending to cut his elbow. Yet, at the very last second, Jaku's sword erupted in a blue lightning, creating an illusion as if two swords had appeared in front of Jaku and deflected the knife before it hit him. The bandit's eyes widened. Jaku's entire body was now surrounded by blue lightning, similar to the bandana bandit's body-enhancing spell. Just then, a blur flashed past the bandit's eyes, and he subconsciously raised his knife, barely knocking Jaku's swing off course and saving himself from a much deeper cut in his chest. Blood stained the bandit's outer garment from the surface-level injury. The bandit looked down at his chest plate and saw a small cut in the middle of the metal. If it weren't for this, he would have suffered a much deeper injury. You're faster than me. I'm 1-star realm above you, the bandana bandit shouted in disbelief. Who are you? You attacked us, and you don't know who you're fighting against? I know I'm lazy, but that's even lazier. Jaku put his sword on his shoulder and disappointedly shook his head. The bandit's eyes widened as he finally remembered the rumors. There were talks about the famous fighters of the Reborn Company, the people who defeated the Stone Cold Six, the Dragonborns. You're the Dragonborn? Jaku nodded. The bandana bandit gritted his teeth and gripped his knife tighter. It doesn't matter who you are when there's 10 of us. 5 bandits thrusted their swords behind Jaku. The Dragonborn's body erupted in a blue lightning, allowing his speed to reach even faster limits. From their perspective, he seemed to have disappeared from their sights, leaving the bandits to crash into one another. Massaging their heads, the bandits looked up and searched for Jaku. They looked up and finally saw him on the other side of the restaurant. The dark blue-scaled Dragonborn took out a freshly cooked chicken from the counter and pinched a small piece before eating it in one go. The bandits were shocked at the audacity. Get back here, the bandana bandit shouted, empowering his knife with a thunderous quality. His body almost turned into a blur as he lunged towards Jaku. Clink! At the moment of impact, the bandit remained still. Slowly, he raised his head and looked at the blade on his knife. It had been shattered into a million pieces on the ground. Ow! Jaku didn't let the bandit recover and hit him in the head with the flat part of his blade, knocking him out cold. Then he disappeared into a blue lightning bolt again before reappearing right in front of the 5 bandits. Flustered, they tried to overwhelm him with attacks from all different sides. And for a brief moment, Jaku's body blurred into 5 different bodies, with each one hitting a bandit's knife and deflecting their flurry of blows. Slowly, the bandits felt their knives chipping and cracking with each blow against Jaku's sword. At this point, they slowly retreated and stopped attacking him. Yet, it was already too late. Their knives had shattered into useless metal scrap. Before they could even react, they saw a blue blur before a blade slap them in their heads, knocking them out cold instantly. Ha! Boom! This is fun. On the other side of the restaurant, Zion had been toying with his bandit targets. The red-scaled Dragonborn had been weaving left and right as all 4 bandits thrusted their knives at him. Despite the reckless action from a youngster, none of the blades were able to reach his scales. This was the perfect opportunity for him to practice the Dempsey roll skill that Michael imparted onto him. What the hell is up with this kid? The bandits' attacks became ever more sluggish as they felt exhaustion creeping up on them. They had been at this for a full minute, yet they couldn't get a hit on Zion. Oops, Jaka said as he looked at the other side of the restaurant. Bro Jaku's done with his practice. Time for me to finish this, he said. As the exhausted bandit thrusted his knife at him, Zion ducked down and performed a swift uppercut to the wrist, disarming the man. And with a left-right 1-2 combos, he disarmed the rest of the bandits around him, with their knives haphazardly flying off into the ceiling. Befuddled, the bandits were left defenseless as Zion prepared his final move. Space Breaker Punch! He shouted as his dark violet gauntlets began to glow a purple light. Space itself began to crack around his fists, propagating further as Zion gathered power around his gauntlets. I told him to not overdo it, Jaka muttered in a disappointed voice, watching from the sidelines. His body erupted in blue electricity again as he teleported himself to the innocent civilians that were about to be caught up in a massive explosion. Zion didn't even seem to care as he finally unleashed the power of his punch, with all 4 bandits being caught up in the propagation of the cracks in space. The Dragonborn's gauntlet hit the first bandit squarely in his stomach, launching him forward. And somehow, the 3 other bandits seemed to have been caught in the force, feeling as if a big boulder had hit them like a meteor. They shot off into the walls, destroying the tables and chairs that were in the way. They then burst through the glass windows, skidding an extra 50 meters outside before stopping on ground.